morning and welcome back to Powered by Progress, the Technical Operations Training Summit, Learning Together 4.0. This is our fourth year doing this, and it's really a thrill to have all of you with us virtually. We really miss being with you in Norman, but not having the summit was not even an option. So we pivoted quickly and came up with a way to do it. Normally, we're going to start with going over the ground rules and how we're going to work in the summit. However, one of our very special guests has some critical appointments that came up. So we're adjusting the schedule, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled welcome in just a minute. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you someone who needs no introduction because most of you work for him. But we all, at some level, work together with Jeff Planny, our Vice President of Technical Operations. Jeff, welcome to Learning Together 4.0, or rather, welcome back. We really look forward to hearing from you this morning.
Thanks, Abby. I tell you, I just got a little editorial. Waiting to join with you, and the flexibility of this program. Outstanding work. I feel really energized, pumped up just listening to the music and the cues from the team and get ready. This is the energy that we definitely need to put behind training, and I appreciate you again, as I mentioned yesterday, to continue on with this training summit and our focus on training and dedication to improving and moving forward. Just a few comments from me. I wanted to outline a little bit of my focus moving into post-COVID and our focus on training. What does that mean for us? Where do we see some progress? Where do we see some areas for improvement? So I appreciate the time. I'll just take up a little bit of it and let you get back to your normal program. So, well, I think, as leaving the call yesterday and thinking about what are some words that would depict where TechOps is and where we left off from last year, the last summit. And I would say that for me, it's two words: commitment continues. What we meant and what we shared last year, and our commitment to working with all groups towards redefining, prioritizing, and looking for opportunities within the training world now is even more important than then. And we will build on the success that we've had since the last training summit. So from a TechOps VP perspective, I can tell you that our commitment has not diminished. We continue to invest our leadership team, any resources we can to help work together, as Abby said, as a team to overcome the challenges. And this COVID-19 and the uncertainty that it brings has been one of the largest challenges for all of us, whether training or not, to overcome. But I am confident that the impacts that we're experiencing now, while mean a longer recovery for the organization and specifically to our ability to recover training and get back on track, I am confident in our team's ability to work together and leverage some of the accomplishments that A5 has already done. And you heard me yesterday say that relationships are important. And I think we will build on the relationships that exist within the A5 and that committee and make it even stronger. We've dedicated the senior leadership through Sheila Griffith. I think I mentioned that yesterday. Sheila is already engaged and was prior to this engaged in some of the things like quota management, our focus on making sure that we support the 15 courses that we identified as priorities with effective course management, or quota management, quota management. I think this A5 group pointed out that yes, there needs to be some advancements in training and delivery and throughput, but also pointed out where we as an organization, TechOps, could improve. And that's the type of collaborative focus that I think got us to where we were in prioritizing, making progress in certain areas. I think we went from, and you guys will be able to correct me on the math, but I think we went from a throughput of 49% last year for these 15 priorities to almost 90%. And from where we started to where we ended, we need to continue to leverage that and build on it for the future. We'll continue to deliver field conducted courses where able and look for those opportunities where we can expand. We'll also continue to focus on course development. And this is an area that I know we've been focused on. I know there's various stages of ECG, ERAM, WSP, and micro EARTs in course development. I'm going to challenge you and challenge the entire group to find new ways to accelerate that training. While it was important prior to this national pandemic, or world pandemic, it's even more important now. The backlog for those key courses is grown, and they are still critical to the NAS. So I would challenge you, and Sheila, I know will challenge you, to look for new ways and what gates, if you will, are limiters to our ability to move forward very quickly and challenge policy so that we can bring these courses and their development to resolution and move forward. So we will be looking for those things. That's going to be a priority for us. Obviously, we'll reprioritize what courses with this current impact are a top 15 or whatever, but we will help working together with the A5 to reprioritize and pick up where we left off before this pandemic. I mentioned quota management. We'll continue to build on what Sheila has established with our team. We want to re-engage our program support specialists and their engagement with field training, what that looks like, what OJT looks like, and we have some ideas around that, and even common principles. So all that to tell you, nothing's off the table. What you'll find with me and our team is that if you as a team recognize that there's inefficiencies in anything that we've already established, let's pick on common principles. If there's an area that we can improve, let's do it. There's nothing off the table. We need to continue to focus on areas to gain efficiencies. We need to continue to look at new hire training and the associated metrics that indicate to us that there's value in the things that we're approaching. Totally good with breaking a few eggs if things don't work and readjusting. That's the strength of our organization. You're seeing that today within the national crisis pandemic. We are flexible. Our strength is working together, and we are more resilient than we were before because of this crisis. No different with training. If we approach things and find that there's no value, let's back up and reassess and move forward. Let's also look, and this will be a big one for everybody. I know we've talked to Michelle and Abby and Glenn about leveraging technology, looking for those courses that we can, quite frankly, deliver through virtual learning. Abby is a big proponent of this. I've heard Abby for several years focus on virtual training, the digital age. What does that look like for us? We're in it. We're living it. We have to find a way to take advantage of this type of distance learning to really focus on our ability to enhance training. In fact, the other day we did a national managers call, and that energy is growing within our management ranks about how do we replace CBI with this new technology. So I think the time is right for our workforce to look for those opportunities and leverage change and move forward. So, I'm not normally a patient person because I have a lot of energy around change, just like a lot like Abby does around we can do this, and I tend to be overly optimistic. So you will feel that and our focus and push to make some change, build on the successes of A5, build those relationships, and really change training through technology. So with that, I really would like to see if you have any questions, or Abby, turn it back over to you to see if there are any questions. If not, I'd like to give you back your time and appreciate the flexibility.
Well, good morning, Jeff. It's good to see you. I'm not Abby, obviously, but I will facilitate some questions for you if you don't mind. It's wonderful that you were able to join us, and I'm really glad that you were able to make your time.
Okay, I might have lost you, so go ahead.
Can you hear me now, Jeff? All right. So I'm not sure if we're having some technical difficulties here. we do have some questions queued up. I'll use this opportunity while Jeff is reconnecting to remind everybody in the audience that the Q&A section is open, and we will have the ability to read those and submit questions to Jeff and have him answer them as soon as he can get back on. This is your opportunity. We know that not all of us get the opportunity to talk to him on a daily basis, so this is a great chance. I see some people are starting to enter those into the Q&A section now, so that's fantastic. Hopefully we can get this worked out to where as Jeff joins us again, we can pose these questions to him in the limited time that he has. So as a reminder, as Jeff's going through the reconnection process, this is just the flexibility that we have to deal with in a new webinar format. But as Jeff is going to reconnect here, this is just a great time for us to also point to the tools that we have available to you. As we go through the day, we will be using Slido. So if you remember that, go ahead and log on to slido.com. The code is TOROCKS. So if you get a chance, you can get into that and you can actually see some of the Slido questions. I'll use this as an opportunity also to tell everybody at the end of the day, we will likely have a polling question available. And this will just simply be like a survey at the very end that allows us to ask you questions like, how's the TechOps Summit going? What worked and what didn't? How many days were you able to attend? So you're going to see some questions like that at the very end of the day. We'll publish that sometime around the last hour. So again, if you're not logged into Slido, I encourage you to do that. I ask that you get that ready, and we'll make sure that we introduce that again later in the day so that you can give us the feedback that we desperately want and we need to make sure that we improve this thing every single year. Even if it's in a different format next year, we want to make sure we're getting better. So I see that Jeff is back online. We'll see if we can get his camera working there. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good, sir. So I'm going to facilitate a few questions for you if we can get that going.
Sure,
so from the audience, we've had a few things coming back on. One of the big questions that came in was really around what's your vision for the concept of operations for TechOps? I know the maintenance philosophy has been a conversation piece since you became the vice president. Can you discuss a little bit about that and maybe how that interfaces with training?
Sure, that's a great question. So the concept of operations has got many initiatives within it, but let me focus on a couple. One of the more recent things that was coming to fruition is our ability to manage remotely and conduct maintenance remotely. So if you will, this is the focus right now is on e-com, so en route communications. And one of the initiatives is to give the technicians the tools to do that through either their iPhones or remotely through technology versus traveling hundreds of miles to a RCAG remote communication site. So they're very close to this. We're piloting it in Boston. I think that's going to change the way that we utilize technology and leverage it so that the technicians have the ability to learn and understand what the system's doing before they get to the facility. So that's one of the aspects of ConOps. We're also looking at other service threads to see how we can do that. And I think that's going to change our approach to maintenance. Certainly will change our approach to training and how we utilize those devices. As you're probably all aware, most of our technical workforce were issued iPhones, those that are more in the GNAS, Geographical National Airspace System. So they have those tools. The trick is for us, and ConOps is working on this, how do we leverage applications and technology within those devices so that we have the ability to train remotely, have technical services, either FaceTime in or Zoom in, and assist with OJT, virtual training. In fact, I saw today, the team's got researched a device that you can strap, it's kind of a little scary, strap your iPhone to your head and do virtual NASTEPs and virtual training in that matter. As you know, NASTEP is one of our evaluation groups that not only evaluates technical capabilities and performance, but they also tend to train our folks when they're on site. So we're going to leverage that. ConOps is leading, got some great minds working on that. And that's just one area of many that they're focused on.
Well, that's a really great segue into another question we got. You've mentioned several devices that have been put out there for technicians, tools that you guys are looking to leverage to make sure that everybody's able to do things smart instead of maybe a legacy way. One of the questions that we got from a person out in the field, Catherine Wiedemann, she asked the question, what will the agency do to help technicians who have difficulty learning through remote or virtual platforms? And I think that that probably also goes to the question of what about technicians just using these tools in general? I know that you've got a lot of commitment behind this effort. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about that.
So the question is, how would they leverage these tools or learn to use them? Is that the basis of the question?
Well, it sounds like the question is, yeah, if for those that may struggle with technology and we're moving more towards technology solutions, what level of effort or help is being put out there for those individuals?
Well, I think I appreciate that question, because having stepped into this pandemic, and the environment that TechOps basically quickly shifted to remote reporting, flexibilities within telework, a complete utilization of, look at us, what we're doing today through Zoom, very little training. Some of this is intuitive. Some of it is going to be a challenge for us. So I think hadn't considered that type of training development, but certainly if we're going to fully utilize the capabilities within something as simple as Zoom, because I know there's more ability behind it. I think that's a challenge for us together, Micah, to work to develop training that may not be there. Certainly TechOps has multi-generations of technicians. We have the most senior workforce in strength. And so I think we have 4 generations of technicians working and dedicated to this. So that's going to mean a pretty big span of skill levels for virtual technology and use. So definitely a challenge, and definitely something maybe we can chat about later to figure out what's our strategy there.
That's a great I think, offer to the field to make sure that we're making inroads and helping them to use the tools. One last question. I know your time is limited here. Last year, we ended our conversation that we did via phone with you standing in Alaska with a bear over your shoulder. We ended that conversation with a simple question that I'd love to ask you again, which is, if you are to come back here 1 year from now and we have this summit again in whatever format, what will success look like to you, sir?
So almost the same. I mean, I can picture the bear behind me. I always think that I'm funny. But success to me would be that, we have that energy about training. Everybody's talking about the new types of training that we were doing. And the shift slightly from last year, I think there's an opportunity within this virtual and digital world that we have to adapt to. And so success to me would be that the Academy is the leading provider of that type of distance learning, and that we have the skill sets able to, zoom into a facility and do field conducted training from the Academy in that site. So I know we can do it. I know that technology and the experience of the Academy and our team is there, as well as yours. I think we can do that. So success to me would be that we fully realize several courses, and then that's our new way of life. And we've adopted that. So I got to run. I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. Have a great summit. Thanks for all that you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for joining us. And so for audience members, we just want to say thank you for submitting so many questions. And unfortunately, we had limited time with Jeff this morning, but we are capturing those questions, and we will try to provide answers either in written form through the Q&A forum, or in an after action when we do capture all of these and submit them into one single document. So with this level of flexibility, we're going to pivot and come back to our regularly scheduled program, as Abby indicated before. So Abby, I'm going to invite you back to the stage here, and let's do an introduction again.
Yeah, and so with that, I've got to have my sidekick, Deputy Director Kathy Samays, come on down. So there she is. So again, welcome back, folks, to Learning Together 4.0. This year's theme is Powered by Progress, and I think what you've heard, if you've tuned in Tuesday and Wednesday previously in the days, is there's been a lot that has happened, and it's the power of us all working together. So we've already heard from Jeff, and I know we've got a lot of exciting panels coming up. As the day goes on, we're going to hear about engineering. We're going to hear about how we're really leveraging data to do better forecasting and placement of people just in time at the right time. And we're going to hear again from Vice President of Safety and Technical Training, Glenn Martin. He's going to talk again and join us at the end, and much more. So what I want to remind everybody is when you ask a question, please preface it with your name and the organization that you work in, because it really helps us with targeting the right answer, especially if we can't get to the question in full, but also because if we have time, we may invite you up to ask the question live, kind of like what we did with Dave Bowerman yesterday. So it'd be really fun to just really try as best we can is to recreate that energy that we have when we're together and have a studio audience as well as a virtual audience like we've done the last 3 years. So
but don't let that scare you off. If we won't invite you in and put you on camera without your permission, promise.
Yeah, good point. I forget. I mean, not everybody is an extrovert. And so with that, Kathy, what are your reflections thus far of how the summit has gone?
Gosh, I think it's gone, from my perspective, it's gone great. I would love to get some feedback from the folks out in the world that are watching this. Yeah, I think that yesterday was great. I loved the all the discussion about the collaborative efforts, and as well as the instructor optimization and the development efforts that we have underway. So I think that was all really good and educational information. I think that was good. Today's theme is preparing for tomorrow. So I'm excited about that too, Abby, and all of the topics that you mentioned a few minutes ago. You know, we've got a lot of things about where we're going. The engineering training plans that we're going to be talking about, I'm super excited about that. And a lot of the out-of-agency training and the technology and things like that. So looking forward to today.
Yeah, and I mean, so I'm looking over some of the questions that came in, and I'm going to go ahead and answer a question from Slido Anonymous, was the person's name. And Slido Anonymous asks, are there any challenges preventing training delivery organizations from adopting interim distance instruction methods like an improver process or funding? I love that question because as Jeff just mentioned, and I know Glenn mentioned yesterday, and there was some discourse about it on day one, COVID-19 has given us literally, we flipped the switch and said, okay, now we're going to do something different. And so we have pivoted where we can. I know there are several courses that we have offered to do in distance learning. And I know that Micah and his team, especially Ada Vadopoulos, has been working diligently to bring a whole bunch of correspondence courses into the 21st century. So there is that. I know that we're finalizing details with PASS to bring some of the concepts courses into a virtualized environment, which is amazing. And I think you're going to see more and more. I know weather systems processors that Robert Collins talked about yesterday is another one that is really right on the cusp of a first course conduct, I think, and that will be all virtual. I think that first course conduct is in June. And so we're moving as rapidly as we can and trying to balance that with good efficacy of making sure we've met the learning requirements that are needed for folks. Kathy, did you have a chance to peruse any of the other questions and see if there's something that we could do a quick answer that might have come up in the meantime?
No.
Okay, I'll keep looking.
No, sorry, and I hadn't. But one thing that I wanted to mention, you know, with regard to what you were just saying is it's been an interesting pivot, I think, that we're doing right now, because there's a lot of people who think that tech ops training can't be done, and that air traffic and tech ops training cannot be done this way. And it's been an interesting opportunity to show that it can be, and we've had some wins. I think we mentioned the other day that we're doing air traffic AT basics is being done remotely. So it's an interesting conversation figuring out how this will work for tech ops with labs and things like that. You know, it's not your traditional distance learning opportunity, but these aren't traditional times right now. So I think it's going to propel us to the future.
Yeah, awesome. So there's a question from Cynthia Sump, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Cynthia. Cynthia asks, some of our SSCs have ideas and questions for revising existing courses. They want to improve the courses available for equipment systems they're maintaining. How can we get them connected with the people who can make these improvements happen? And I think Micah Campbell's going to pop back on because he's pretty jazzed about answering that question. Micah, come on down.
Jazzed. I use that term all the time. I don't know why.
You show your jazz hands.
I don't think anybody wants to see that. No, that's a great question. And the answer to that is really focused on what we did on our first day. Whenever we had our breakout sessions in different Zoom areas, we had requirements leads that are focused on each functional area within the NASP. We have 10 functional areas we call training program areas. And those requirements leads are really your point of contact in the NASP. Those are the people that are concerned about the curriculum that you're talking about. So I would encourage everyone to look back at that agenda, look back at those attachments on the first day and see the names of those requirements leads. There's a couple of areas that we weren't able to present. Weather was one of them and communications was another one. But reach out to me, reach out to Johnny Riaz. We have another team manager, Michael Dunbar, who can't be with us. But if you want to reach out to any of us, we can connect you with the people that have those answers and that are able to start looking into the issues that you care about. So that's a great question.
So, oh, I just totally blanked. Well, what I was gonna say is it's really been fun to see the progression of the last 4 years, and I really got a kick out of watching the video yesterday of where we have been when we started this journey together 4 years ago, and where we are and where we're going. I mean, just kind of to emphasize and amplify what Jeff said a few minutes ago. He wants kind of more cowbell, if you will, for what we've done to date.
Hey, Abby.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That's great.
No, I had a question for you, if you don't mind. What do you see as the biggest win over the last year? What's your perspective on that?
Oh my gosh, there's just so many. I mean, I think so. I have to say that, I mean, pre the pandemic, the fact that we were like pumping people through and had really crashed schedules both at the academy and augmented by commercial off-the-shelf training, because I know that what we heard loud and clear last year at the summit was people are desperate to get their frontline employees either in initial training or in systems training or some hybrid of the two. And I mean, it was really a tremendous lift by TechOps, by the Academy, by AJI, and to coordinate that effort and get it rolling. I mean, certainly this is a setback, but I think that the process improvement, the relationships improvement really were stunning in the growth and the hunt as a pack mentality that we've really embraced. I would also have to say that the ability to more agilely develop and deploy training is a real win. COVID taught us that while we thought we had to bring a whole group of people together in the same room and hash out something for 2 or 3 weeks, we could do it virtually in at least as fast amount of time for everything except the labs. So I think we've learned some lessons that we're going to be able to carry forward into perpetuity with or without a global pandemic.
That's awesome. Thanks.
So Kathy, I think Mike is going to kick us out.
Well,
Mike, are you giving us the boot, man?
Because Abby and I could do this all day.
I know, and that's why I'm on here, is because you guys have wonderful energy, and I think that it's been a pleasure to follow both of you, Kathy, even being new in this position. And I know you could talk about this all day, but we do have an agenda to get to. So with that, I want to say thank you guys for kicking us off and for answering some of these questions.
Yeah.
And, we're going to transition over to Autumn Vadopoulos, who's our MC for part of today.
Abby's not kicking off that easily.
I just, you can't kick me quite that quickly. I just have to say one thing, folks, please ask your questions. If you're not comfortable with being brought, I see Manas on screen. Hey, Manas. If you're not comfortable with questions on live, please ask the question in the Q&A, because a question unasked is a question unanswered, and everybody's ideas matter. That's the power of progress. It's powered by all of us working together. So please ask your questions, make your concerns known, provide your innovative ideas. They are so welcome and they are so wanted. All right. Hasta la bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Micah and Manas. We could see you. Thank you, everybody. So you've all got a pre-screening of Manas, but right now I want to switch gears to go over and talk a little bit about last year. So last year's summit, we heard from the engineering field, and we heard that you all were not getting what you need. So we really listened, and our team has been working very hard on planning ahead, preparing for tomorrow, as Kathy had mentioned. So our next panel is going to explain exactly what we have planned and how we're expanding our scope to get us there. So at this time, if we could have the control room, please show the next discussion.
Good morning. Welcome back to our next panel. We have before us a few folks who are dealing with engineering training, and we know that that was something that we were left with last year. But before we really get off into the panel and our discussion, let's look back last year and see what our folks had to say about engineering training.
If I asked the same question to a room full of engineers, and I said it even at 2 months, maybe 5% would raise their hand. There's just a massive disparity between the amount of training a tech can get versus an engineer. So when we look at the future, and we have this huge problem with a giant backlog of certification that has to happen. It's clearly a very high priority. But at the same time, engineering services is a part of this organization, and we don't have anyone else to help us. So if we can't get the Quota Academy, and we can't get AJI to help us create courses, where does that leave us as an organization? And one that's in charge of doing massive implementation and risk to the NAS of touching electrical panels and all that type of stuff. So I guess my question is still, just throughout all this, it's great conversation, but I don't see how it's going to help my organization.
I'll take back the concerns you have around engineering services.
Well, Mike had a very good question. Got right to the point about engineering training and the lack of training that was available back then. And we saw that our Vice President, Glenn, said that he would take that back. So let's talk about what's happened in the last 12 months surrounding engineering training. Today in our panel, we are blessed to have Clint Quisenberry, a requirements lead from AJI with us. Clint, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
All right, thanks, Johnny. Thanks for having me. So first off, I'd like to say what Mike Rohr was saying earlier, it hit spot on with me. So I came over from AJW, and I was a second level engineer for about 10 years. And everything he had to say was exactly true on my side as well. When I came up in the organization, it was kind of a fend for yourself, help out your friends, but not actually have a full schedule of training or technical training to help you out. And I'm happy to be a part of a solution that will take care of that problem.
All right, well, welcome to the panel, Clint, and thank you for your work so far. We also have on our panel, Manas Roros. Manas, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. As Michael has said, Manas Roros is my name. Manas is my first name. It's spelled M-I-N-A-S. And I work in AJW2 in the Air Traffic Control Facilities Engineering Services Directorate in headquarters as the training program lead. And Clint is exactly right. This rung true for all of us. It's something that we've been trying to work on for some time. And basically our role since last year has been to partner, AJW to partner with AJI and make some achievements in coming to a conclusion in terms of planning out some things that we could do for training for this particular workforce. So after assessing the needs within engineering services and getting feedback from our service areas, we decided to address 4 different occupational series: the 810, which is civil engineer, the 830, which is the mechanical engineer, the 850 electrical, and the 855, which is the electronics engineer.
Outstanding.
We chose the 855 to address first because The 855 has heavy engagement in the NAS, and it has a high number of employees within engineering services in that occupation. So the 855, being the first occupation we're targeting, is going to serve as a model and a pilot for the remaining series, which we're going to address later on. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that the process we're going through now for the 855s will be validated and applied for the other work groups. We're taking more time now to develop the process, and we're going to look at the lessons learned, which is a good thing to do all the time, and apply them to future group processes. And we're going to take more time now, which means later the whole process will be streamlined. In the end, the curriculum format basically is going to be similar for all 4 of the series, and it'll be consistent and standard. We also started with creating a cross-functional and cross-sectional group of training experts and subject matter experts. So I mentioned before, Clint alluded to it, that we have a work group. We're looking at the 855s. We got subject matter experts in that field, in the electronics engineering field. We also got talent development managers who represent each of the different service areas, and of course, expertise from technical training and technical operations in talent development. So our group has 9 core group members, and we've had additional members kind of floating in and out. Highly collaborative effort, required significant commitment from our entire working group, and we did lots of analysis, collaboration, and targeted analysis.
Wow, that's a really impressive group of folks. It sounds like you really took that pretty seriously in making sure that we got all the voices heard. That's fantastic, Manas. What kind of methodology did this group use when you tried to attack the issue and find resolution?
Well, when you start a project like this, particularly a pilot, something that hasn't been done before, at least within the FAA for this directorate, we thought it was smart to look at benchmarking and look at best practices. Now, what did this include for us? We pulled and analyzed position documents for the series and looked at those. We collected competency and development data from external organizations. Those included our own Department of Transportation, our own Federal Highway Administration, and even the Army Corps of Engineers. In fact, we didn't have any kind of job analysis information for the 855 series, and we discovered along the way that DOT had actually conducted a competency analysis for that specific series on a broader scale. It was like done on a much bigger scale. So our group decided as we started going through this that those competencies and those definitions were going to be used as a framework for parts of our curriculum development. So our work basically led to assessing the 855 career development cycle and organizing it into 4 different phases. That's how we broke it down. And those phases basically take the electronics engineer from their entry-level training requirements, right when they first come on board, all the way to their senior technical expertise and leadership development toward the end of their career. So basically, our initial work at this point, I mentioned there were 4 phases. Our initial work with this task group within the last year has basically taken us to the conclusion, or almost the conclusion, of phase 1.
That's really impressive. It sounds very comprehensive, which is, I'm sure, great news for everyone in the audience today. Clint, can you tell us a little bit more about those phases and how they flesh out for the engineering student?
Yeah, Johnny, I'd love to, but first I'd like to tack on a little bit of what Manas was saying, and to reference Mike Rohr's statement about engineering services not having technical training. I think that it's important to showcase that AJI cares about the entire engineering community, and we actually have more than 3,000 engineers spread across the NAS in different lines of businesses and different staff offices. And so as we move forward with this project, the methodologies that we chose were intended to be used as a template, something that we can take this pilot program, and while we are going to apply it to all the other job series for the engineering services group, we're also thinking from AJI's perspective, how can we extract from this and lay it on top of all the other engineering groups and functions throughout the NAS. So that being said, I'd love to talk a little bit about the phases. So I'm going to go ahead and share a screen with you here. And as you can see on this screen that I'm sharing, we've kind of laid out what the engineering services job series look like for the 855, the 850, the 830, and the 810. And like I was saying earlier, this is also kind of a structure that we'd like to apply to all of the other engineering phases, all the other engineering groups that we can find throughout the NAS. And so as you can see, we have phase 1 vertically here, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, and those correlate to core engineering NAS foundation training in phase 1, and then engineering concepts and discipline specialization during phase 2. And then you'll see in phase 3, we have engineering design and program management. That's the focus for the training in that area. And in phase 4, you're kind of getting farther along in your career. You're looking at your technical expertise and your non-supervisory leadership skills. And so everything you see here in orange, as you walk along this flow chart, in orange is the path for the 855 engineer and engineering services. And you'll see that phase 1 goes from new hire through the first year of their career. And then the rest of the phases have kind of a tentative to be determined time frame that we're looking at. Once we get in and we determine the requirements for those phases, we'll definitely lay down the information on what those boundaries are.
Clint, that was an outstanding slide you had there, a lot of information. My next question is for Manas. I'm really interested in phase 1. That's what's going to hit the engineering folks right off the bat. Can you tell me a little bit about what the work group did and how you found the parameters that you have defined there in phase 1?
Sure, absolutely. Well, once we started, we got the work group together and we started to meet. We didn't want to just sort of go in and talk about what all the issues were. We sort of knew what the need was. So we structured it to come up with a very structured, a very organized way of dealing with it, and came up with professionally facilitated tools. So our work group was able to complete a number of exercises and analysis to come up with the activities and the duties that were required of people in this 855 series. So then we did more analysis and we did a linking between each of these activities to those validated DOT competencies. Remember, I mentioned those just a little bit ago. So we started to make those links and we used those DOT competencies as a framework for the work that we were doing. At that point, we started to cross-reference our functional activities and competencies with existing FA training. So if you kind of think of it in terms of, we know what they're doing, we're looking at what do they need in terms of development to do what they're doing, and what are the gaps. So this is basically a lot of talent development vocabulary to break it down in a simple way. You're probably asking yourself, what does this mean? It basically means that we can see what kind of development we're lacking for this particular series. So we were able to see what training we needed for this series that did not currently exist. So the outcome of all this process analysis was identifying 55 specific new training developments that we want to develop and add to the portfolio of existing training that exists for this series. So all of it together will comprise the talent development that's required for this series. And remember, this is only phase 1, and there are 3 more phases that we're trying to address, as Clint had mentioned in the previous segment.
Most certainly, and that's really awesome that you guys are looking at this in totality. Clint, he mentioned a lot of the data and the courses in phase 1. Do you have more to say about the data, or do you have any analysis you'd like to share?
Oh, definitely, Johnny. I'm kind of a data junkie, so anytime you ask me that, I'm going to jump right on it.
Outstanding.
So actually, I have plenty of graphs, but the ones I'm going to show you are more pie chart related, just to get as quick data out there as possible without kind of getting in the minutia. But if you ever want to see any deeper, darker depths of my data love, come on over.
I might have to take you up on that.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you my screen here. This is the overview of the curriculum right here. And so as you can see on the top right corner, we've got 122 training elements over phase 1, and that comprises 838 learning hours. And so what we have here is just kind of a breakdown of what the electronics engineer can expect when they come in from college, get hired onto the job, and they're looking forward for the next year. Well, this breaks it down to the typical 2,080 hours that we look at for the quote unquote man or woman hour here. And you see 60% of the time is spent doing project work. So we have 1,240-ish hours spent on the job, focusing on their duties, getting up to speed. And then all the rest of this slice you see, the other 40%, are various types of technical training that we've got built into the curriculum. The gray section, you see 26% or 540 hours of what we're calling required training. That's the training that we think every 855 needs during phase one of their job in order to learn the skills and knowledge that they're going to have to apply in phase one and going into phase two. If you come down here to this orange slice, this is the recommended training. This is the training that the work group thought we need to put some training in here, but they don't actually apply 100% to needing these skills to perform the duties, but they would definitely prepare them for phase two duties or prepare them to do some of phase one duties better than what the competency levels that we kind of determined first were needed. This blue slice right here is just to show you the FAA mandated training. This is your ASH Savvy and No Fear, various trainings that we can't control, but we wanted to account for them to see what kind of burden we were putting on those 855s during their first year. And then anytime you see this hatched training section here where you see a blue and a gray, this is a conditional training. If they take it, it's optional. If they take it, then it affects their curriculum later. If they don't take it, then they can turn that into project hours for this particular section. So this pie chart right here is looking at year one. So this is 52 weeks of technical training and project work hours. And what I'd like to do is, excuse me, move forward and look at what modalities we focused on whenever we put this training curriculum together. It's really important for the engineers to be able to stay on the job on their F&E projects, that they're out there almost 100% of their time in the beginning of their career working on these F&E projects, getting them installed, getting them implemented. And so we didn't want to take them away from their work for a long period of time, bring them to the academy and make them sit for 3 to 5 weeks to do a particular course. And so you'll notice the majority, almost 50%, is web-based training. And you'll see over here, the light gray is a 21% of their time spent in instructor-led training. And the majority of these instructor-led trainings are either out-of-agency training or local instructor-led trainings where they're not having to leave or go very far to receive the training. You have some workshops, and then a large portion of their structure is spent on the job, doing on-the-job training, where they're actually applying some real-world problems to enhancing their knowledge and skills. And just to look at the total, so that was the total curriculum, the total curriculum modalities, and I'd like to now look at all of those 55 new developments that Manas mentioned earlier. What do those look like? What kind of modalities are we looking at there? And you'll see that almost half of the new developments that we proposed in those 55 new developments are focused on the job training. Once again, supporting our effort to keep the engineer on the job. 12% of that is web-based training, and 22% of that is web-based training. 22% of that is video. And you just see 3 instructor-led trainings here. So almost everything that we're proposing that is new is focused on keeping the engineer on the job and keeping those F&E projects rolling.
That's great. Those are great visualizations there, Clint. Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of really important things too. I think that everyone that's watching this probably has a vested interest in this training, because the reality is they're relying on engineering services and all of the things that the engineers do in AJW to make the NAS work. And I know that they're very concerned also about making sure that throughput isn't impacted for the ATSSs as well. So that was some very vital information on how we are going to address it in terms of web-based training or instructor-led training, because I know everyone is very concerned about that. So thank you, Clint. I do have a couple of other questions. I think as we move on and move into the future, as we really work to bring and deliver phase 1 training to the field, Manas, Clint, do you anticipate or what kind of challenges do you anticipate next as you walk this journey and try to bring about this training for the field?
Yeah, Johnny, I'd love to tackle this question. We're just at the beginning of this big project, and we have a lot of work to do. And we definitely are going to hit many hurdles and many struggles along the way. And one of the things that pops out to me most that I think is going to be the biggest hurdle that we see in the near future is our phase 2. We're getting into equipment specialization and discipline specialization. So we're talking about getting FAA and NAS specific equipment training for these engineers that currently have no hands-on equipment time, have no hands-on technical training time. These engineers are typically seeing this equipment for the first time or touching this equipment for the first time in an operational environment. And we need to figure out a way to get these engineers the knowledge and skills that they need for this NAS-specific equipment in an area that is non-operational. And we don't have the capability to support throughput at the academy. So we need to come up with unique solutions on how to solve this problem.
Well, I have no doubt that with the team that Manas described earlier and all of the commitment that all the stakeholders have previously displayed on this project, I have no doubt you folks can get this solved in the coming years. And we very much appreciate your work. Clint, while we're on you, do you have a specific, any kind of timeline that the engineers and the rest of the field can kind of look to see when this phase 1 and maybe even phase 2 training will land?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing that we want to do is get the engineers something. We don't want to sit around and wait while we solve all of these phases and give a final polished package. So our concern is, how can we get something out to them as soon as possible? And so what our plan is we'd like to start rolling out phase 1 as soon as possible. And as we start tackling these 55 new developments for phase 1, start feeding them into the phase 1 curriculum so that the engineers can start experiencing some benefit of the phase 1 right now. And then as we progress forward, we gain a little more momentum, we start pushing in the rest of phase 1. And what I'm proposing is, in parallel, we start performing those actions. We tap the phase 1 new developments. We get phase 1 rolling out to the end users right now, and we tackle phase 2. How are we going to start setting up phase 2? How are we going to tackle those struggles associated with getting these engineers more equipment time? We do those in parallel so that we can end up with kind of a large moving window of products that are coming out for these engineers, so that they no longer are sitting there in an operational environment lacking the technical training that AGI should be providing.
Fantastic. Well, Manas, Clint, thank you so much for your time today and answering these questions. And thank you so much for all the work you've done this last year. We know that it takes a lot of commitment and time and energy, and there's so many folks that are working with you. And so I just can't tell you enough how grateful AJI is, and I'm sure how grateful the rest of the folks in AJW who are going to be the beneficiary of all your hard work feel. So thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thanks, Johnny. You too.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
All right. So going into this next portion of the conversation, I'm going to be moderating the discussion. And joining me is who you just saw in the video. We have Clint Quisenberry and Manas Roars. Thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to the panel. How are you guys doing?
Doing well, Micah. Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
I'm doing great. Same here. Thank you, Micah.
Fantastic. So we do have some questions coming in from the field. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to really build on the conversation that you were having with Johnny. One of the questions that I think really just went straight into what you guys were talking about was several questions kind of echo that sentiment of, where can I find this list of courses? I mean, how am I going to see this? I think you addressed Clint in the video. You said something about, we're not waiting for a final finished, polished product. We're going to try to get this out in a phased approach. So just tell us a little bit about what are the next steps and how can people find these course lists?
Sure, Micah. Yeah, I'll take that one. We obviously couldn't go through every single course on this 122 course curriculum for the phase 1 within our video, but we do have it listed out in a kind of what we're calling an end user curriculum, something that can be like a packet handed to the 855 engineers whenever they come on board. We will have that information posted on the engineering KSN site that anybody can go access and take a look at. I will preface it with, this is still a work in progress, so there are some things that are subject to change along the way, but those will be there for them to be able to take a look at.
Now, when you say engineering KSN, is that on TechNet or is that in AJW2? Where are you referring to?
Sorry about that, Micah. I'm referring to the AJI KSN technical training page. And I believe that that information is either on my presentation that I gave in my breakout room, or I can supply it in another avenue.
That's a great clarification. I believe we actually have the link to the KSN for AJI 2300, which is the Tech Ops Training Policy and Programs Group. We've actually included that on the invitation as of yesterday, because this came up in some of our other groups as well. So that's a great opportunity for people to go view the materials. Manas, I know that Austin Arant was originally the sponsor for this work group, and we were able to get involved and became kind of a real hand-in-hand partner on this. But my question is, what are the next steps for presentation to leadership, and has that been done? What steps do you see happening next?
Well, yes, Michael, you're absolutely right that Austin is the sponsor. The group is still intact. And in terms of the next step, we're at a point right now, as we mentioned before, that we're at the end of phase 1. So we're at a point right now, we've done a lot of work to come up with a structured plan that streamlines the presentation of that phase. So our next meeting is actually going to include a presentation to the work group that sort of takes all the complex analysis that we've worked through as a group and all the complex information, and really we've packaged it in a very streamlined, easier to facilitate format, and we'll just go through it with the group and have a presentation with the group. In addition to that, that meeting will likely also include some confirmation on some next steps that we need to take, some costs that might be associated with this, and some decisions that need to be made on moving forward, not just for the other phases for the 855s, but moving forward and getting groups together for the other series.
Well, that's a great question, because that's also something that our audience members asked. Specifically, somebody in the audience asked, can ops engineering, AJW service areas, and ops support AJW1 be included? And it seems like what they noted was, it seems like this is for engineering services, but it could apply to the other directorates and potentially engineers across the NAS. Can you guys speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, Micah, I'd love to take this one. I kind of alluded to it a little bit in the video, but when we were approaching this problem for engineering services, we did everything we could along the way as we were building this architecture and overall manner of attacking this problem to be able to apply the structure and the infrastructure of this plan to every facet of engineering within the NAS. Now, of course, everybody knows that every engineer in different areas has a different list of tasks and skills or duties that they may have to perform. And what we tried to do was build in the flexibility into this structure and build the flexibility into the flow and plan that minimal modulation of this plan would be needed or required to apply it from, say, F&E engineers over to AJW1 second level engineers.
That's a great, I think, addition. I think that it's good to be able to show that our goal, I know that this is a partnership right now between AJW2 and AJI, but I know from an AJI training perspective, you referenced Michael Rohr's question from last year, and I think that that general sentiment is something that resonates with us in AJI, because we recognize this is an underserved community in terms of technical training. So absolutely, we're looking, I can say from a group manager perspective, we're looking to kind of expand to cover all of the different engineers eventually, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the NAS and making sure we have a competent and prepared workforce. One of the questions that came in was around training in the modality and kind of where and how. Specifically, the question was asked, do we envision 855 training in resident at the Academy? Is that something that's a part of that portfolio that you described?
So Micah, that's a great question, and I think it should be on everybody's mind as they're going through this presentation on what the burden is going to be to, say, the technician or the other people that are additional stakeholders to in-residence training. As we mentioned in the video, the goal is to keep these engineers on the job, to keep these engineers performing their F&E work and their NAS modernization work with little little pulling away from that ultimate goal. And so when we're looking at phase 2 and we're coming in and looking at the challenges associated with getting their hands-on equipment time for equipment training, we're really not considering adding the additional burden of in-residence training at the academy. Even further, to counter that viewpoint, what we're trying to do is figure out how we can separate the theory of operations of particular equipment trainings and the associated corrective and preventative maintenance labs that are currently the primary focus of the in-residence training for, let's say, the path to certification, which the engineers don't need. So our goal is to try to separate those and give the engineers the ability to get the theory of operations courses with only having to have that path to certification parameter capability in areas where they need it. For example, second level engineering may need to see a little bit of that because they're the OPRs for the handbooks.
Well, that seems like that answers another question that was in there about whether or not this is going to compete with ATSS training. And it sounds like you're saying that for theory of operations, they may have overlap, but for the hands-on portion that's really linked to more performance evaluations and certification parameters, that would still be reserved for ATSSs. It sounds like that's what you were saying.
That's exactly correct, Micah. And I think that out of those two choices, to compete versus amplify, I would go with amplify, because when we look at the engineers' curriculum in phase 2, and we do an assessment as to what the requirements are for their knowledge and skill level on each equipment type, there may be some areas that we need to enhance the existing theory of operations that are available through, say, the academy courses for the engineers. And that just increases the bank of skill sets that we could pass on. And if ATSSs or TIDs are something that could benefit from that, that's something that we could assess in the future.
So Manas, can I ask you a question here?
Sure.
One of the things that I know is true is that engineers have gotten really good at meeting the needs however they can. I know that if you go from service area to service area, there's different models of how you all are preparing engineers to be competent in their career fields. Do you see that model continuing, or will that be a hard cutoff? I mean, how are you guys envisioning this as a phased-in approach?
Well, my hope is that there will be a transition once the work continues with this project. There will be a transition, and my hope is that we will come up with a standardized national curriculum that we can use all across the country. So I think that's one of the things that's lacking now, that will be one of the value-added items from this project, is having that standard curriculum. And earlier we mentioned modality. One of the things that, when you talk about adult learning, modality becomes important, which is to say that it's important to attack training from a variety of different platforms. So one of the things we try to do with this curriculum, most of the training, people mentioned they would like to see what the courses are. Most of it falls under the categories of administrative, technical, safety, and communications. And so we integrated that with all different types of modalities. That is to say that we integrated that with online training, with instructor-led training, with videos. So we're trying to attack it from a number of different platforms, because we know that adults learn in many different ways.
Yeah, that's a true statement, I think, across the board. So I guess this sounds like a huge effort, and it sounds like a lot of energy behind this. How many people are on the panel right now or on your work group? And does that just represent 855s, or are there other disciplines represented as well?
For this particular work group, there are about, I want to say it's about 9. There are 9 members, and that includes the training managers and the SMEs, and of course, Clint, myself, and our sponsor. Right now, our SMEs and our training managers were all focused on the 855. So we'll need to develop and create new SME panels as we move forward for the other series.
Now, Clint, I know that you did a lot of analysis. You mentioned in the video that you're a data junkie. I think that probably serves pretty well in this function, and probably have served you well over the years being an engineer. I know that in the process of doing research, you found that there was similar curriculum paths or training development paths, maybe in other organizations. Can you say a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So when you say other organizations, we looked at not just within the FAA, but we also looked out into the DOT and the Army Corps of Engineers, and as well as the Air Force. And we found plenty of similar approaches towards building a curriculum. I think the area where we're trying to make it a little bit different on this end is once we acquire job analyses data for all of these job series, the intent is to be able to come up with assessments that when you enter into a phase of their curriculum development, they can have an assessment that looks at what phase 1 skills or what phase 2 skills and knowledge bases that they may need. And then based on their assessment, intelligently and strategically apply that base curriculum to give them a more strategic curriculum based on what their assessment responses were. So it's kind of like a more intelligent delivery of a static curriculum, so that we don't just have one packet that says you're doing all of these things regardless as to what skill sets you come into this phase with.
So as we come to an end of our question and answer session, Manas, I want to give you a last question here. You're interfacing with Austin, who's the executive sponsor for this, and I know that you're talking to folks in AJW. What's your sense of, is this going to meet the need, and also your sense of how's this partnership working? Can you just tell us a little bit about, what's the conversation like behind the scenes right now?
Well, I think that this is great. I think that these are the training gaps and the needs that we have been a topic of discussion, especially at this summit for the last 4 years, as Abby, I think herself had mentioned. So we're excited about the partnership, obviously, and we've put a lot of work into this. So I think we've done a lot of good groundwork to start our approach of standardizing the curriculum. We've done a lot of work to analyze and see where the gaps are. So I think we're really excited. We're still early, like I said, we're at the end of phase 1, so we're still kind of early, but my feeling is that the general consensus is that we're definitely on the right track to start meeting the needs that we have.
Well, I want to thank you both for being a part of the panel, and also just for putting in so much hard work. I happen to have been the beneficiary of seeing Clint and Manas, your work and all of the different slides and different graphs. I know there was a lot of data that went into this, and so I'm hopeful that the audience at large will be able to see that at some point. And I know that we'll make it available as soon as it's been approved by all senior leadership and we found some paths to go down. But I just want to thank you both for all the hard work that you put into this. And I would encourage audience members out there, if you have ideas around this, if you're an engineer that's looking to contribute, go through your training managers in the service areas, funnel those ideas upwards. And I know that this group will obviously consider those and look at what can be used in the future, because we are absolutely very concerned about providing the technical training necessary for a competent workforce. So thank you both for joining us. All right.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So the next thing we're going to transition to here is a break. But before we go to break, I believe we have a Slido question.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for your input and responses on this Slido. It's really exciting to see. Control room, let's scroll down and see some of these answers. We've got environmental courses, in-fire glide slope, engine generators, DC bus, air conditioning, basic electronics, battery maintenance, a lot of concepts. All right, we see climbing on the list. That's fantastic. Boilers and chillers, I know that's been a topic for several of these discussions. Circuit breaker maintenance, all kinds of great answers. Thank you so much, audience, for participating all in here. We see anything, equipment with software, code, or regulatory. Awesome. Thermal imaging inspections. These are all wonderful answers. And that really cues us up for our next segment. Our next segment is really focused around out-of-agency training and some of the folks that we have been working diligently the last year to try to optimize and get that really off, started for us. So what we're about to see is a video here hosted by Mike Dunbar. And Mike Dunbar, I just want to take a moment to say, Michael Dunbar is our third team manager in Tech Ops, and we haven't seen much of him this summit, unfortunately. He's out with an injury and is recovering, but our thoughts are with you. Thank you so much for, if you're watching out there, Mike, for what you've done to really make all of this possible. But we're about to see Mike Dunbar moderate with a few of our other folks in AJI and see all of their hard work. So let's tune in and see what they have to say about out-of-agency training and what they've been able to accomplish.
I'm Michael Dunbar, Team Manager in AJI Training Programs. And the next topic on the agenda is out-of-agency training. But before we dive in, let's take a look back from last year and see what some of our participants were saying.
But what I like to focus on is taking advantage of factory training for environmental systems, chillers, cooling towers, boilers. That's where we can take benefits of not utilizing the academy and get really hands-on from the factory.
The HVAC systems, and I know it's been discussed and looked at a national level, but it seems like we have so many different HVAC, chillers out there. Potomac TradeCon, I have 2 buildings, and I have different sets of chillers for each building, and I'm getting a new set for the command center as they upgrade it, which makes it very complicated for getting that training or even factory training, because you're looking at different places everywhere we go. How can we get it to where we're having 2 to 3 vendors nationally that we're using instead of the vast array?
One more time, the problem I haven't solved is how am I going to maintain a curriculum that's up to date and current with all of the things they need to know. That's what keeps me up at night.
Wow, it's pretty clear from Dave and Steve and Glenn that there is a need for out-of-agency training. So to dive into this, let's start with Bob Walesby. He's a requirement specialist with AJI on detail, and he kind of broke ground with the out-of-agency training program with chillers. Bob, what did that look like to you?
Hi, Mike. We had a lot of success last year running the chiller training. We were excited to be able to bring dozens of classes out to the field. We held the classes across the nation, many different cities and states. So it was an exciting time. We trained 4 different vendors, and we're hoping to be able to continue that next year.
That is so excellent. Chillers isn't our only area, though. We also are looking at environmental, and we have with us today Robert Bryan, and he's a requirements lead with AJI, and he's in the environmental area. Robert, what does that look like to you looking at out-of-agency training?
Mike, that's a great question. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Last year at the summit, we listened, we investigated, we stretched our understanding of what the 21st century training environment looks like. We went out and we've talked to our manufacturers, we've talked to our facilities, and we've concluded that we can actually have specialized training down to the almost make and model specific for each individual facility.
And so as you're looking at this, what kind of challenges are you running into pursuing this path of training?
Stretching ourselves beyond our current expectation of what training looks like. Embracing modern technologies, embracing virtual realities and augmented realities, embracing Zoom type technologies where we can teach remotely. It's actually extremely cost efficient to have manufacturers show up on site versus have students travel to Oklahoma City.
Excellent, excellent. And as also on the panel, we have Jody Bowie, and he is an instructional systems specialist with AJI. Jody, what does the future look like to you as far as out of agency?
Well, to be honest, it looks a lot like what we're seeing right now with a lot of virtual training. Having manufacturers that understand what adult learning looks like and how to engage people when they're in a remote situation. It makes that idea that Glenn focused on of maintaining the curriculum a whole lot easier, because we don't have to worry about that. We let the vendor or the manufacturer or whoever focus on keeping that training up to date. That goes right along with the equipment.
One of the benefits I've heard of this too is that it frees up Academy resources to focus on FAA specific training. What victories have you seen in the chiller area that you've done? Because you've been doing it the longest, and you set the bar for this. So what victories have you seen?
The main victories that we've seen is been very well received in the field. One complaint that we've had in the past is that they would get their training and it would not be specifically applicable to the equipment that they have. So when we can bring the vendor right on site and be able to give them 3 or 4 days of very specific training, not only that, they can, sometimes the vendors will be able to help them out with making the equipment more efficient and teaching them how to be able to save money in the long run with costs and things. So it works out well for everybody.
That is excellent. That is excellent. I've heard it said that Terry has said in the past that chillers keep her up at night. What kind of throughput numbers did we get as a result of that effort in order to help alleviate and help her sleep better?
We've been very successful with that. We've had training at both the manufacturer's facilities and at FAA facilities, and both were very well received. Just this last year, we ran through about 4 different vendors. We trained over 225 students across 22 classes in 18 cities. So we covered a lot of ground and got a lot of good training out there.
Very good news. So Jody, you kind of touched on this. As far as out of agency training goes, how does that help with maintaining a curriculum and helping us to focus on FAA specific curriculum while industry is already working on their own and maintaining their own?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. You know, a lot of times I see as we're developing training, I hear things like, well, we don't have the documentation for this yet, or there's a change in the documentation that's coming. And I feel like the out of agency folks, as they're, you know, making a modification to the equipment or something like that, like they know when those things are coming, and they're better able to communicate that to the folks who maintain that, who maintain that training. So we don't have to sit and wait for maybe the FAA bureaucracy or red tape or whatever you want to call it that it takes to trickle down in the documentation. The manufacturers are already working on that documentation, and they get it to their folks, and that helps to maintain that curriculum more effectively, in my opinion.
That sounds really efficient, so thank you for that.
Hey, Mike, to add to that, the requirements leads are identifying at the earliest phase of requirement development that all new manufacturer procured training must include perpetual training updates and modifications.
Yes, that's a great point. Let's lean into that a little more, Robert. I've heard talks of efficiencies where one manufacturer can do more than one discipline. Have you ran into that? Have we researched that?
Yes, we have. We have several training institutions in the NAS that teach a barrage of courses that are almost perfectly applicable to the FAA. The power systems, the NEAS, electrical principles, troubleshooting, test equipment. These private institutions, there are corporations and businesses in the United States that utilize the same technical maintenance philosophy as we do. They just don't have the radars and the navigational aids. So these institutions are poised and ready. They're teaching all across the United States. They're teaching on our military installations, and in fact, they're teaching in foreign places too. So yeah, we have a great set of tools available to us. We just got to reach out there and take the low-hanging fruit.
Wow, that was a lot of good information on environmental, but I know we're not just focused on environmental. Jody, what have we looked at as far as out of agency goes outside of environmental? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Some of the things that we're looking at are with our concepts courses for technicians, for new hires, when they go into radar concepts, antennas and transmission lines, nav, ILS, those kinds of things. And we're not just limiting ourselves to manufacturers. We're also looking to see if there are academia, which is actually the background that I come from, to see if somebody's already teaching the types of courses that we need for those concepts courses. And it was, we've had a few things already, like day one of me joining the FAA, I came in and somebody asked me, hey, you've taught physics before, you want to be our math tutor? And I was like, sure, yeah, I guess. I mean, I can do that. I've done that before, not necessarily in my comfort zone, but since then, our math refresher for new hires, we've contracted that out to industry where somebody else is taking care of that. So it's probably a little better quality than what I was giving them, I think.
Excellent. Well, my son's in high school, so let's post your number up there so that I can use you to tutor him as well, please. So thank you.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
So I imagine looking at universities, also the DoD may have some similar equipment, some training they've already done. Have we looked at DoD?
Yeah, we're definitely not limiting ourselves when we do any sort of market research. We're looking to find anywhere that is doing the type of training that we need.
Excellent, excellent. I want to kind of go back to chillers, Bob. That was such a hot topic last year. Maybe you could lean in a little bit of what brands we've looked at so far, and are we fully covered? Do we still have some more work to do on chillers?
We do have some more work to do on chillers. That's one of the problems is configuration management within the environmental discipline as a whole, and chillers in particular. There's just so many out there. We did train the top 4 that are in the NAS. The Power Services Group did some research and figured out that would cover the vast majority of them. But ideally, we'll be able to cover every chiller that's out there. Maybe just one class of a very small manufacturer, but 8 or 10 of the York. So it gives us a lot of flexibility by using the manufacturers for this training.
Excellent, excellent. And I know you all are experts in your electronic equipment and tech ops, but it almost sounds like you've had to learn some contracting. What kind of contract challenges have you ran into, and are you contract experts now?
I am definitely not a contract expert. It is a big job. It's a pretty complicated process that they go through, so I appreciate their work.
So Jody, as an instructional systems specialist, what is your take on the quality of the training you're seeing and that you've reviewed so far compared to what can be done in the FAA? We have a pretty high bar. So are they able to meet our high bar?
Absolutely. Vendors or manufacturers or whoever, academia, they're capable of that. We just have to ensure as an instructional system specialist, that's part of my job, is to ensure that the rigor of what we're looking for is there. And then it just becomes a process of maybe branding it more towards the FAA or something like that. But we're absolutely ensuring that the rigor is there and the quality of the training is there to meet the bar that the Academy has set, which is frankly very high.
Yes, it is indeed. It very much is. So, Bob, earlier you had hinted on that we got very good feedback from our early chiller works. Do you have any specific feedback that maybe a student had given that comes to mind?
Some of the one of the statements that stood out in my mind that occurred over and over, which is not real specific, but they were saying that it's some of the best training that they've had throughout their entire FAA career. So, and that was across all vendors. So that was a big one that surprised me. But the second thing was that they really appreciated that it was so specific and to their exact equipment that they're working on. So we can get the general training done maybe at the academy or some other location, but then the specific equipment is nice to be able to have at their facility. And that was a big plus, big comment plus that we got.
Yes, that sounds like a huge win to be able to send people to specific training of specific equipment at their facility. I've heard we've had courses that maybe for efficiency's sake in the past has multiple vendors, multiple systems in one course. Robert, what have you seen in that as far as efficiencies that can be gained out of agency versus maybe having a large class to try to cast a large net on students?
You know, that is truly a powerful question. As a previous technician, going to a class that provides a barrage of training on multiple pieces of equipment, it's very difficult to go back home and assimilate that training into the piece of equipment that I am required to maintain. So there is a lack of efficiency in that approach. I understand why we got there, but in today's time and in today's NAS in our airspace, being able to be very effective and efficient in our maintenance and troubleshooting requires that the technician have very specific and detailed instruction on the equipment that they maintain. So it's a tremendous haul to shift from where we were to where we're going. But if I may add one, this is such a powerful tool to us because previously we've never owned or at least advertised a curriculum. Today, we're looking into the future and we're looking at reoccurring training, refresher training, being able to work with our vendors to provide additional skills training. This has really opened up a brand new world to the FAA technicians.
I truly believe that too. Thank you for that, Robert. I've also been looking at fire panels for a while, things like that that are building safety. And when you think about how you wrap your arms around a full curriculum to every single different panel that's in the NAS, that's pretty daunting. What can this do for that, Robert, as far as such a huge number of different pieces of equipment?
Mike, there's so many hurdles when it comes to fire life safety equipment. There's state, local, municipal laws governing who can and who cannot. And even though they're in our facilities and we're required to maintain them, some places restrict us because we don't have any national recognized certifications. And so the states and the cities of the country take that very seriously. And we haven't been able to provide our technicians with that type of training yet until recently. Bob Wellesby and I set on an adventure post our last summit and really stretched ourselves and engaged the primary vendor or manufacturer for fire suppression equipment in the centers. And to date, we've taught 6 classes, and they're training at the most state-of-the-art firefighting facility in Michigan. It's been a stellar success, and we're looking forward. We're embracing the alternate fire panels that are in the towers and the TRACON. We're trying to come up with a plan for a national program for our folks to be able to attain a national certification, much like the NICET certification.
Wow, so that really makes sense in just one system to try to stay on top of curricula would keep me up at night, just like Glenn said. So imagine that multiplied across all the other systems for sure. What do you have to add to that, Jody? Do you have anything to add to that as far as instructional soundness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, coming at it from an adult learning standpoint, having students be on the system that they're using at their facility is crucial when it comes to applying that knowledge, rather than I'm on some generic thing and I'm, as as Robert said, I'm going to assimilate that into what I take back to my facility. It's absolutely crucial for them to be working on the panels that they actually are going to be using. As far as an efficacy standpoint on the training, you know, we can do that and ask people to do that in some generalized training, but it's just the quality of the training is so much better when they're actually working on that specific equipment, which I think that's one of the huge takeaways that we have from this out-of-agency training initiative.
So I'd like to thank everybody, the panel. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience and for taking the time to answer the questions. You've obviously put a lot of passion and energy into answering the call from last year, and I know that our audience is very grateful for it, and I'm excited to see what is in the future to come as we move further into this endeavor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It's been good.
All right, well, that was a great panel covering some of our basic topics with out-of-agency training. I'd like to invite the panelists to join me, Robert Bryan, Jody Bowie, and Bob Whalesby. Hi, gentlemen. Thank you. All right, so I'm looking at some of the questions we had from the audience. The first one I see here is Cynthia Sump had one. It said, a lot of the out-of-agency courses have been canceled due to the COVID-19. After the great response to the need for this training with the SSCs, they're concerned that it may fall by the wayside. Is that a risk that you see? We'll pitch this to Bob Whalesby. Is that a risk that you see as we are coming out of this posture?
No, actually, I don't see this being a problem moving forward. It's becoming a bigger need every day as we continue on. Just next year and the year after and forever, it's going to be something that we really need to pursue. So, no, I think it's just going to get stronger as the years go on.
Well, that's very optimistic. That's really good. I'm hoping everybody's pretty excited about seeing what we have around the corner. I know that Robert Bryan, I know that you have been working with some folks with out-of-agency, and there might be some potentials because of their agility to be able to even meet the need of doing it in distance. Is that what you've experienced, Robert?
Yeah, isn't that neat? Recently, I've been in constant conversation with all of our out-of-agency participants throughout the COV as just general good fellowship, but particularly the Viking corporations went out and extended themselves, created virtual Viking, created gaming protocols, and really went and did the unknown. I didn't even know it was available. Recently, as of last week, they offered this opportunity to us. We're going to get Viking training now in the comfort of our own facilities and homes.
All right. So I have another question for you, Robert, that's come out of the Slido, and that was vendor training I've attended in the past has been almost kind of a sales pitch, which is an interesting take on that as a training more than a training course. How do we prevent that, or how do we keep that from happening?
Well, that was the case previously, but when we assumed this new role, we were told that by our technicians and employees. And so we went out and for HAI to make the training available, it has to conform to our 028C or as best we can. And so we advised and communicated with the training provider and kind of help them articulate their training curriculum that best fit the FAA needs.
Okay, well, fantastic. I'm glad to see where there's some dialogue there to continue to improve some of those processes and expectations there. I think the next question I have is for Jody. This comes also from Slido. Excuse me. How do we deal with manufacturers training not addressing FAA orders, federal guidelines, and at facilities? But also, I think to extend that, to combine a couple of questions, how do we make sure that they're up to our standards in general for learning?
Sure, absolutely. I saw one question come through that was something like, some of the trainings I've been to kind of come off as a manufacturer sales pitch. How do we avoid that also? So this kind of all ties in together. We have our own branding. We have our own guidelines and orders that we have to put that in when we vet this training.
And so that's where the instructional team that I'm on, that's one of the things that we're mandated to do from our orders. So we ensure that they do. We don't allow them to not do that, I guess would be the best way I would say that. We have processes in place. We have validation events that we go through. We get feedback from students. We get feedback from SMEs. You know, we're trying to involve a large team of people so that it does meet our standards. Like I said in the video, the bar is pretty high, and we're not going to let that slip. We're not going to let the quality of training slip, whether we're changing the modality or we're changing who's presenting the training. We're going to ensure that it meets those objectives.
Well, we certainly appreciate that, understanding your role as our kind of instructional system designer as we deal with a lot of this out-of-agency work. Bob Wailsby, I know you've had some like quality work that you've done with these specific vendors. When we were taking off with the chiller workshops, how did you deal with the uneasy feeling or the concerns about making sure that the training was really what we needed it to be?
Yeah, Johnny, that was a big concern going into these projects. So I got a lot of feedback from previous courses saying that it was just a big sales pitch. And so I wanted to make sure that that was not the case. So we made it very clear to the vendors going in that this is what we were looking for. We also made sure that one of us attended the first offering of every class from every vendor. So we can sit in and say, you know, yeah, that was great, you did a good job, or no, you know, this is a little too much towards your equipment or your specific vendor equipment. So we had to really vet that. We also would go through the orders and make sure that what we were looking for in the orders matched what their vendor training material was providing. So we would do that individually and also with SMEs, big work groups. We just want to make sure that we are completely covering all of our bases.
So Bob, you said you actually went and attended the classes. You traveled out to the sites and did that yourself?
Absolutely. I would do that, or Robert Bryan, or sometimes a member of the Power Services group would do that. But we made sure that we attended that first class every time to make sure we were getting exactly what we were paying for and exactly what we needed for the students.
Well, that's very thorough of you and pretty impressive.
And we also got, sorry to interrupt, we also got real-time feedback at the time from the students. We could directly interact with them, find out what was working and what wasn't working for future classes as well.
All right, and so that specifically with chillers, that was a really interesting endeavor because at that point, most of the students had already attended a chillers class, or in some cases they weren't, but in most cases, a lot of cases they did. So was the training designed to, you know, complement that? And the reason why I'm asking that is I know that we were hearing a lot of words like modularization and trying to break things up. Is there some potential there for that to be kind of a long-term strategy?
Oh, absolutely. It really works well with the modularization. We can get the initial training done at the academy or someplace else, and then be able to get really specific on their equipment at their facility. And so whenever we can break that down into a modular form, it works out better for everyone. It's more efficient. It's everybody is happier with it. It also lends itself to progressive training for later on in their career, so they can continue to break up the training and learn more and more as they go on.
All right. So Robert, with these when these workshops were happening on site, so to speak, or in these various cities, were they engaging with live equipment? How did that work? Any thoughts there?
They were engaging with live equipment. The facility was taking some cases, you know, a partial outage so that they could get their hands on the equipment. Now the vendor never interrupted the operation of the system, but pointed out, however, the technicians were significantly engaged. And at this point, this was just the initial training that we provided, because there's follow-up trainings for a much detailed, more intimate and involved training situation to where they can open up the equipment and get that unique advanced skills training.
All right. So I have another question for Jody from the audience here. It says, from an instructional perspective, are we validating vendor training? Are we saying these courses are equivalent? I know up front, the first three that we target weren't specific classes that we were teaching at the time, so there wasn't anything necessarily to replace. But what are your thoughts there, Jody, as we start to enter these kinds of situations?
Well, as Bob mentioned a minute ago, one of the things that we do is we go and attend those courses, and if we could use that as a first course concept, which is one of our validation events. In fact, that's usually the last event before it's validated, assuming the course validates. And so probably some folks that are on right now have been involved in some of those first course conduct, either as a SME, looking at feedback, or as a student possibly. So we're not just gonna say, okay, that manufacturer over there makes this piece of equipment, just go on and go to their training and let them go. We're not gonna do that. We're definitely gonna put the lens on, does the course meet the objectives? What are the objectives of the course? Do the testing, do they test for those objectives? And at what depth do they test those objectives? So we're absolutely ensuring that it's not only up to snuff as far as instructional goes, the instructional piece of it, but additionally the FAA. Does it meet our guidelines? Does it meet our needs for what we have?
Well, I know a lot of folks in our audience are very concerned about that. I think that there's this struggle between trying to tear down all of our process barriers and the red tape that's associated with some things, but also making sure that we don't overlook those quality concerns that everybody has, because as you know, as an instructional system designer and Robert and Bob working on the requirement side, we've got to make sure that we're still meeting the need from a training efficacy standpoint. So we're very glad that you're doing that work. I see one question that's pretty interesting. There was a question about if we're willing to do some out-of-agency course material, what is that? Where does that leave us with like a YouTube style learning, which isn't specifically about out-of-agency, but I will say that there is, to answer your question, we're working very diligently with AJW trying to get that TechNet video library up to do just that thing. All right. So let's see what else we have in the audience. Very good question. Is the out-of-agency course content owned by the vendor or the agency? And what happens if the vendor stopped providing the training if it went out of business? I think, Robert, maybe you can speak a little bit of that as we start to talk about time frames and periods of performance, but more specifically, how are we preparing ourselves to deal with those kinds of challenges?
So they're going to be vendor-owned and vendor-delivered training curriculums that are approved by the FAA. We are going through the market research process to find the best vendor to provide this training, but generally when we're speaking about vendor-specific training, that tends to be that group that is filled as the legions of equipment in the national. I know it's a little nearsighted to say, but I don't expect any of these major vendors to fall, victim to going out of business. Not anytime soon.
All right. Well, so I have a question from the audience about DoD training. So we've talked about vendors quite a bit in this question and answer session, but I think we did mention during the actual moderated session some work with DoD. And I think, if I recall correctly, Jody even talked about universities. Jody, let me pivot first to you and then over about DoD. But Jody, with the universities, how's that? How does that fit into this overall process?
So, in doing some research, we've found that there may be some universities that have some courses that would work, but we're finding that right now is probably not the time for that because of the I don't want to overstate it, but the dire need from AMA to have those courses to be delivered to the field. So we're pushing forward right now with going ahead and developing those concepts courses in-house, but we're not leaving the possibility of DoD or academia or whatever. We're not limiting that as a possibility for the future. We're trying to meet the need right now while balancing what the needs are going to be in the future as well.
All right. So Bob Wailsby, you got some thoughts about DoD, or have we already partnered with them? Or are we planning to? Is that an option? How's that looking?
So I've not been directly involved with that, but from what I understand, the DoD has got some great programs that we're able to share with them, and we're going to start working with them more in the future. From a personal standpoint, I worked training 30 years ago as a technician. And even at that point, the Department of Defense, their training was just far and away anything else that I would see out there. They had simulators that would move for aircraft and submarines and sonar and everything. So I can only imagine that it is so much better today than it was back then.
All right.
And while their mission is significantly different than ours, their throughput requirements, the burden of putting in employees in classroom at the moment isn't that feasible. However, DoD does have some very large contracts with very large corporations for specific chiller, boiler type equipment. And so there's potentials for aligning ourselves in that fashion.
All right. Well, I know that also we've got a little bit of, we've been partnering a little bit with NDP and really working together with our folks on that side of the house to really engage with the Department of the Navy and a few other branches there. And so we're really excited to see what that yields and how that bears fruit over the next year. So panel, thank you so much, Jody, Robert, and Bob. Thank you for all of your hard work and all of your willingness to persevere and get through this. Thank you.
Happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
All right. I believe next we have a Slido question before we go off to break.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Let's take a look at our responses that we got to the question, if you could choose one new piece of technology to put into the hands of every technician, what would it be? So let's take a look. We've got an improved Elms on Blackboard, application that provides test equipment, more use of interactive social media. We've got iPad, training video infrastructures, PC-based test equipment with USB attached or some wireless probes, the HoloLens, hands-free body cameras, all sorts of advanced applications, YouTube-like app for maintenance and repair, iPad, functional mobility test set, mech suits. Okay, that's a new one for me. Any Android tablets, a lot of tablets, rugged cellular tablets, Microsoft Surface with the MiFi, more tablets, iPads. We're sensing a trend here. Augmented reality, iPads, tablets, cellular-enabled tablets, rugged iPads. So we're seeing a trend going on here where there might be a need for iPads or some type of augmented or virtual reality that we could have. So thank you for answering those. Control room, if you can put that down. Thank you. So this kind of goes into our next topic, which we're going to be discussing the training needs predictability and technology solutions for the future. So in this group, we're going to have Susan O'Hara speaking as well. She's our manager of the Training Technology and Tools Group. Alan Borling, that you're familiar with, our training liaison for Tech Ops, and Bobby Simpkins, who's a training requirements lead. And Micah Campbell is going to be our moderator. So if we could queue up the next video, we'll be ready to start. So while they're queuing that up, if you do have question and answers, please use those in the QA session with your name, title, and organization. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much. Welcome back. I think we've had some really interesting and informative discussions so far. It's really been great to hear from our leadership. And so now we're going to have a discussion on training predictability. And we're also going to talk about some of our programs, including one called PLAN. So today I have some panelists here with me. We're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about the field's perspective. So to do that, what I want to do is first introduce our panel members. And so first up is Sue. Would you take a second, please, and just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and what your position is now.
Sure. Hi, I'm Susan O'Hara. I'm based out of Oklahoma City, and I'm the group manager over the Tools and Technology Group for technical training.
Wonderful, Susan. It's great to meet you. What's your background?
Oh gosh, I grew up in software development, so I've been a project manager over 87 projects over the course of my career, including small scale ones that just took a couple of years to do, all the way to the most recent project I worked on, which was a more than $1 billion 10-year contract that I worked on for the agency.
Wow. $10 billion is not a small sum of money. We could do a lot of training with that money. If you have any connections, that'd be fantastic. But what I will say, I know that you're also responsible for quite a bit now in AJI. Could you just explain a little bit about your scope of responsibility?
Absolutely. We provide tools and technology that support both air traffic and tech ops, and also a little bit of work with the safety data that's coming in to the organization as well. So we are doing remote training and providing all of the infrastructure that's needed to deploy iPads and applications on the iPads for the air traffic front, and then working on a learning content management system that will centralize the storage and the ability of us to build all of our curriculum in a central location as well. Lots of really cool projects going on in the Tools and Technology Group right now.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to hear about your vast experience, and we're looking forward to the conversation. Another panelist that we have on is Bobby Simpkins, and he is also assigned to work on technology. So if you will, just take a second, introduce yourself, and tell us what you're working on.
Thanks, Micah. My name is, as Micah said, my name is Bobby Simpkins. I'm on the plan team as a requirements lead. I'm focused on the phase 1 implementation that we'll be talking about shortly.
Wonderful. We also have our AJW training liaison on, Alan Borling. If you will, just, I'm sure people have heard from you a few times by now, but we'd love to hear just a little bit more about your background. So just tell us what you do and what your scope is right now.
All right, thank you, Micah. So yes, I'm Alan Borling. I'm the National Training Liaison with TechOps AJW1. I've been in this role for about 2 years, and my position record is a TechOps manager in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Wonderful. And I neglected to start off like this, but hello again. My name is Micah Campbell. I'm the group manager for TechOps training policy and programs, and I'm excited to host this panel. So to get started, in order for us to kind of frame the conversation around technology, about training predictability, and about the plan program, let's go ahead and just take a second and look back at some of our previous comments and interactions from our summits past.
Our people really need us right now, and we know what we know about training. We need to get it to them. We need to get it to them easier. We need to get them to them when they need it, and we need to find some technology to help us do that.
And I think with the new technology that we have now available to us, we could make a change and become a strong FAA as we are today. Thank you.
But we've always left additional requests and additional ideas on the table. And it's not easy, and it's difficult to go through those priorities, but I'm only trying to impress upon you that this is important, but when we can't convey and we can't tell people what we're going to do and what we're going to accomplish and what the money is we need, they give the money to someone else.
Well, I think we all heard the message pretty clearly coming out of last year's summit that we were results oriented and that we need technology to help us solve the problems of getting training, getting it at the right time to the right people in the right way. So that really frames our conversation pretty well. We've had some ongoing developments. One of them has to do with what's called Predictive Learning Analysis Network, or PLAN, and that actually has gone in phases. And the most recent phase that's actually wrapping up is Plan 1.0. So Bobby, I'm going to kick it over to you and ask, can you please just give us a little bit of background about what Plan 1.0 is and what the scope is and really where we're at?
Sure, Micah. So Plan 1.0 was really a test of our ability to take the existing information that we have. We have a lot of databases out there that don't talk to each other, and we use them individually. And so what we did in Plan 1.0 is take each of those databases and we mixed them. We used a software platform called Tableau, which is a visual analytics software platform. And we took the FCEP, we took FIPS, we took our CTS databases, our LMS training histories, and we were able to utilize that to create dashboards for our frontline managers and PSSs to be able to visualize in one place what training was required for their technicians. We think that we did quite a bit of training on it, and I think it was very helpful to our users in the field.
About when did that start, Bobby?
2016, around August of 2016, we started on that program.
So where are we at now in Plan 1.0?
So Plan 1.0 is up and running. The dashboards are out there for the PSSs and frontline managers to utilize while doing the call for training. So it's active, it's out there, and it's a tool for our field to use.
So if I was a PSS in the field, what would it look like for me to engage with this dashboard? Do I go through a website? Am I doing this through a desktop application? What does that look like?
So AGI has a wiki page that's been established, and all of the dashboards are linked off of there for the users to see.
Have you gotten any feedback about the usability of it, or about how well it assists them in doing their job?
Most of it has been very positive. There's been a couple smaller issues with speed and things like that, but we think we've overcome those. Some of that was initial, but lately it's been quiet. Usually quiet is good when it comes to the feedback.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. And that's a good opportunity for us to really bring Alan into the conversation. I know that you have a unique relationship with the field. Tell us how Plan 1.0 is working.
Yes, thank you, Micah. So Plan 1.0, it's been a successful transition. We've been using the tool for nearly 2 years now. I personally use it quite a bit for researching training type issues. And I know it's very invaluable to new SSC managers as they're trying to build training plans for not only their new hires, but also their seasoned technicians. You can quickly look to see what technicians are trained in particular systems and how far along they are in the path to certification.
How does that differ from the tools that we had previously in place before Plan 1.0?
So prior to these tools, or prior to the 1.0 tool being put in place, a lot of this was just spreadsheets and checking various websites. It was very labor intensive activity. So if you weren't intimately aware of every specialist in your location and how far along they were in each training path, it was a very daunting task to go through every year. So now that process has been automated, it quickly pulls together from the personnel system, from the training system. It looks at our FSEP, our database for systems, compares everything together, lines up the theory of concepts, the OJT, and then the performance exam. It sees how far along each specialist is for each individual system. So it's very useful.
Yeah, Alan, I think that those are really valuable tools. I know that there's been some challenges with getting the databases correct. So just remind us 1 second, what is a FAC and a FIC? Whenever we think about that, I mean, not everybody in the audience has a training, maybe a PSS background or a TPMO background, but just remind us of what that is, just real quick.
Sure. I'm sorry. A FAC is a short name for a facility. A facility is a piece of equipment that we use in the NAS. An example would be an ASR, which is Airport Surveillance Radar. We have multiple different types of ASRs, Airport Surveillance Radars, and we break those down by FICs, which are facility identification codes. And we have different, those would be, an example would be, one would be an ASR 9, one would be an ASR 11, we have ASR 8. So we have ASRs, then we have the breakdown, the next level, which would be the individual types.
Fantastic. Well, I think that clarifies that question. So that provides a lot of insight. Well, I think that we're moving along now to where you're starting to get that squared away. I know we've been working on the FSEP data to make sure that we have the correct information in there and we're actually separating equipment. And I think that really helped a lot from what I know of the project with moving towards getting training plans, especially for new hires. And that was a part of what we've already talked about in this conference so far, the A5 initiatives. So Alan, I'm going to go back to you for a second and say, what work have you done on the training paths for new hires and how does that fit in?
So we've made a lot of progress in the last year. With the implementation of the new format of new hire training, we've gone to a shortened, condensed version where a majority of the work is done upfront through correspondence study or ELIMS. We had to find a new way to assign this work to the new hires without really overburdening the SSC manager or the program support specialist. They already have enough work to do. We don't want give them more tasks and more things to monitor and track. So in collaboration with the service centers and AGI, obviously, TechOps, we all work together to come up with a curricula plan for all 2101 new hires, at least in the generic sense. So as soon as they onboard and their ELMS account's created, it flags the ELMS system to look into their learning history and see if they've completed either math or building environmental concepts from one of their, maybe a previous career or whatnot. From that point, it assigns the prerequisites. It also assigns policy and logging training, as well as some of the safety and EHOS training. So from that point, they're covered for the first few months. They have an assigned training plan. It allows them to go in at their leisure, see what's due, see how much time is left. They can complete that, take their exams online. It's a very streamlined process. Looking forward, we've been working with management services as well to start identifying these employees in a little bit of a micro level to where we can identify their disciplines coming on board. And then from that point, automate most of the process to start assigning to the system level for each new hire employee going forward.
Well, I know that really kind of frames the work that's been done as a part of the A5, and frankly, we consider that a huge success of the A5 is being able to work with you, with management services, with the plan team in order to get that going. But we also know that we're moving into the next phase, which is called Plan 2.0. And so that's something that I want to bring Susan into the conversation. I know that you're fairly new into the position and you've kind of bitten into this giant apple of plan and you're trying to really figure out how to attack it. So from your perspective, tell us what Plan 2.0 is bringing to the table, and maybe even some of the delineation of, I think we're going to do some splitting between Plan 2.0 and maybe the next phase of Plan 3.0.
Sure, Micah. So actually Plan 2.0, we were really trying to bring home all of the remaining components that needed to be delivered in Plan. And we've split it into Plan 2.0 and 3.0 for the purposes of getting some functionality out the door into your hands as soon as possible. And then we'll work on Plan 3.0, which is a little bit more complex in nature. Plan 2.0 includes capabilities that we're able to provide out of the ELMS COTS product, which is commercial off-the-shelf software product, natively without having to do a lot of customization and configurations. It'll include training and implementation for some new processes like managing your OJT and PE in ELMS, assigning and tracking your path to certification, and then also recording and approving certifications. It will also do some behind the scenes stuff like some interconnectivity with other systems, continue migrating some historical certifications, and then centralizing the certification data maintenance in ELMS. So that's what we kind of call the easy part. The hard part is some 12 capabilities that we looked at with the gap analysis and said, hey, ELMS can't do this in the software natively, so we're probably going to have to go out and have something proprietary built specifically for the FAA. This includes things like highly analytical capabilities, potential some artificial intelligence functionality to build the predictive components that we need for quota management. So our team right now is looking at the strategy that they want to employ to deliver these custom capabilities, and they'll give us a delivery schedule. What I'm anticipating is that it will roll out towards the end of FY 2022. It will include training and implementation for a few more new processes like the call for training, the continuous call for training, and then the allocation of prioritizing enrollments and then forecasting the training needs. So the last thing that we'll do is include any migrations of any remaining technical training plans into ELMS, and then hopefully wrap it up and put a bow on it and get it out the door as quick as we can.
That sounds really complicated. If I heard you correctly, you did say that FY22 is the target. Why so long?
It's highly complex, and we'll certainly have to bring on the services of a custom software development team, a contracted team to help us do that. But at the foundation of all of this work for Plan 3.0, we need to really build upon a solidly re-engineered business process that implements the latest and greatest methods. We've got to start thinking outside the box a little bit on how we manage quota. So it'll actually start with some research, and then we'll re-engineer the business process to be the most efficient process that will work for technical operations. And then we'll build the software on top of that to have a really nice package that's streamlined and hopefully in place to last for about 10 years to keep us moving forward pretty quickly.
Well, I think ultimately our goal, I know from an AGI perspective on the training policy side, is we would like to have clear, consistent guidance. And it sounds like with the ELMS-based integration plus maybe a proprietary software, it sounds like you're moving towards something where users will have a pretty common interface instead of having to access multiple systems. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's the goal. We want it to be one graphical user interface, or GUI, and we want it to be a streamlined process that's really user intuitive and user friendly, so that the folks who jump on board don't have to go through very extensive training to figure out just how to use the system to do their jobs. So we want to make this a great product for you guys so that it's a pleasure to use.
Well, I know that in the past we've had challenges. These projects, I think Bobby mentioned right from the very beginning that we've been working on Plan 1.0 since 2016. So these things don't happen overnight. But I know, Bobby, you didn't say this in your intro, but I believe you're an operational support manager in the field. That's actually your position of record, correct?
That's correct. I'm for the Jacksonville district, actually.
So whenever you're thinking about Plan 2.0, and I think she mentioned some things in there with respect to OJT, performance exams, the certification paths, just tell us a little bit from an OSM perspective, and maybe even from your employees' perspective, what value does that add?
The way that we did things previously was very manual. Everything was a paper copy, a PDF, a signature, an email, a fax. What we're moving forward with Plan 2.0 in the first phase is automation, and I think that's what everybody wanted. We're automating the pass and certification. We're automating OJT and performance exam. We've taken the time and we've moved all the tasks from every OJT and every performance exam that we certify, or equipment that we certify. We've automated it into ELMS. The performance exams will be taken there. We'll use e-signatures to move those along. We've moved the certification database into the LMS, and it'll flow. We'll flow with the path to certification, the theory, the OJT, the performance exam, and straight into certification. And we'll manage all of that in a single automated platform. And that's what the field screamed for, because I mean, we spent our times doing things that we were doing 20 years ago, and we have all this technology around us, and we're finally moving in that direction. It's going to be great for the field.
Well, I think that's probably a perfect segue. You know, when we talk about somebody who's a tech ops manager out in the field, Alan, you've got that kind of perspective as well. And so just maybe as we wrap this conversation up, we know that training needs predictability is about looking into the future and about understanding, as Bobby just mentioned, the paths to certification. How do we set a new hire up for success? And then into the future, how do we make work smarter so that we're not wasting time doing manual processes? It sounds like the graphical user interface is going to be a way to expedite work and to make it simpler. So from your perspective, Alan, maybe as we wrap this conversation up, just tell us, if we're successful at this, what will that look like?
That's a great question. To me, success looks like almost transparency in the background. There'll be a lot less manual work. Managers and training specialists will be able to focus on other activities. Most things will, in terms of predictability, modeling, projecting out training, those types of things, that'll be done for them and given to them as an option. For the last 20 years, we've fit our processes around the way the software has been designed, and we've sort of tried to fix things after the fact to try to compensate for the way the NASA's changed. I think as we move forward, a new platform will allow us to be more agile and to adapt to the way that tech ops is changing in the field, and so on in the future.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to take a second and just say thank you, Susan. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Alan. I think that this is an important conversation because it's going to affect the field. So at this point, I'm really looking forward to hearing the questions that you all have out there in the audience and in virtual space. So we're going to go ahead and transition now to our live Q&A session. Again, thank you for our panelists.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. All right. Well, that was a really good panel discussion, and I know there's a lot of detail that many of you are very concerned about because it will impact you.
I'd like to invite Susan and Bobby to come on the stage here virtually, unmute your videos, and let's go ahead and have this conversation. And Alan, of course, thank you for joining us. So this is a huge area of concern, I know, for the field, because this technology directly impacts them in the way they do their job. So I know that first and foremost, we've made a lot of progress with Plan 1.0. Do we have an actual date when we think that that's going to be finalized, or we can call that one complete? And Bobby, I'll kick that one over to you.
The first phase of Plan 2.0 is we're gonna set that to be fully in place, I believe, by the end of September of this year. We just put out the implementation dates on that just yesterday, I think, is when they came out. But we're looking to gradually bring all those in. We're beginning the training starting June 1st for the PSSs and frontline managers, and we'll progress on through that. And our goal is to move the certification database into LMS. July 27th, I believe, is the day. It'll take a couple of days to migrate all that information over. But we expect to be fully up and running by September 30th on phase 1 of Plan 2.0.
Now, I'm fully aware that these are tentative dates, that we're putting out proposed schedules. And I know, Susan, this falls under your purview, your area of responsibility, and something that you've been working on in the background with program managers. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think the only thing I'd really like to add is that there's a lot of work that goes into finishing up this Plan 2.0. So we've got to still implement some OJT and PE processes and record and approve new certification processes that need to be implemented into the system. There's a historical certification migration that's underway through August. And then assigning the path to certification processes will be in there too. And then implementing the new hire training programs will be completed by the end of September. The team is really working super hard, and I thank them very much because they've done a lot of schedule compressing to try and get this program completed and out the door before the end of the fiscal year, and they're doing a great job.
So I know that there was a question on here specifically about phase 2, because we mentioned in the video that phase 2 and phase 3, and there's some clarification about that. So maybe I'll kick this back to you, Susan, for a question about phase 2. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that and what we can expect in the near term? I believe the question says, will there be a phase 2 this year? But maybe there's a little bit more detailed answer you can provide.
Right, so it's really complicated because we have Plan 1 and 2, and then we just recently broke it into Plan 2 and 3. So 2 are all of the items that I just mentioned in just the last couple of seconds there. But then 3 is going to be the part that's all of the artificial intelligence and the predictive analysis and that type of stuff. The continuous call for training with quota management, the allocation of prioritized enrollments, and forecasting the training needs. And that's the one that we're starting to work on now. And we believe that one will be deployed sometime in FY22, probably closer to the end of the fiscal year.
Alan, I know that you've been pretty integrally involved in all of these conversations with the development of Plan. From your perspective, are there any bottlenecks or things, especially that AJW is working through with the Plan team, and what do those look like, and how can people help?
That's a great question. I think it's such a large undertaking that we've had to go back several times. We've had to take a step back and look, well, are what we're doing in the Plan software work, is it really lining up with the way that TechOps is moving towards? So we've been throwing a lot of challenges in the last year. Obviously, with COVID happening, there's another one coming at us. But it coincided with TechOps really ramping up the number of new hires we're doing. We've almost doubled what we've done in previous years. So to get these new hire training profiles uploaded, get that automatically done, it was really a pressing need to do. So I think we've been agile enough to sort of address those issues as they popped up. But I can see this over the next few years, especially with what's going on right now, it's going to be a major challenge.
Well, I know we've had some other questions coming in. I'm going to ask the control room to do something that we haven't done a lot this particular webinar session. But we did have a question that came in that was a little bit vague, and maybe it's a great opportunity for us to look into the audience and just ask, do we have the opportunity for you to, well, really, can you explain what your question is? Lisa Bacon had a question that just simply said, what's the name on the wiki? And Lisa, can we just ask you, if you wouldn't mind unmuting, just ask a little bit more, explain exactly what you're looking for.
Well, he had mentioned that you could find the sections on the wiki webpage, but when I went on wiki, I couldn't seem to find it. Is there, I mean, how do you find it?
And Lisa, if you don't mind, what's your position or record? Where are you out of, and kind of what do you do?
I am an acting PSS in the New England region.
Wonderful. So Bobby, that sounds like a question maybe you can address.
I was going to pipe up and answer that. So Lisa, if you're familiar with the Plan 1.0 wiki page where the dashboards were previously at, have you been shown those before?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, I will be glad to send you the link to that. Any of your peer PSSs should be able to provide that for you as well, but it's simply is wiki.fa.gov, and I think it's /plan, P-L-A-N, and you'll find the dashboards there as well as the training information for the forthcoming implementation and some other information to go with with its implementation of phase 1.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Well, that's really awesome to hear directly from folks in the audience. We had another question in here that came from Catherine Wiedemann, and she asked the question, will the implementation of plan change any approval roles for first and second level managers with regard to endorsing and granting certification authority for ATSSs? Anybody want to take that one?
I can take that one as well, Micah.
Okay.
So the answer to that is no, it's not going to require any changes. We're going to follow the current 3000.57a approval roles as they were there before. The only difference is now is those approvals will take place inside of the LMS platform with digital e-signatures. So it's just, instead of the paperwork following the managers around, they'll be notified when it's time for signatures to take place, but those exact approval roles will remain the same.
Okay, so as a last question here, I'm actually going to toss this to Alan, representing AJW. I know that you're about to end your tenure as a liaison here for AJW, but since you've been so involved in this, I just want to ask you a final question. What are you most looking forward to? And this was actually a question from the field that came in, but what are you most looking forward to when this rolls out successfully and we're able to transition this? What are you looking forward to, and what do you think is going to be the major impact of the field?
Okay, yeah, that's better than the last question. That was a good one. That's a great question. So I think what I look forward to, and I just think back to my perspective as being a tech or as a SSC manager or as an ops support manager, just making life easier is always a good thing. And I think for a lot of technicians, they come on board, they're not really sure when they're going to be going to training or in what order. From the manager's perspective, they don't know when training is going to be available or how in the hierarchy of things where their particular training need fits into the rest of the NAS. And I think with a lot of the work we're doing, and it's a long-term project, but it's going to have, to me, big dividends. There's going to be a huge payoff to where a lot of this work that we've done, so much manual, I don't want to say manual labor, but manual entries over the years, that type of stuff will just go away slowly. With each implementation of each phase of this, you'll eventually get to where the employee comes on board. Within the first year to year and a half, they're going to reasonably know when they're going to be expected to be in a training status, when they're going to have to travel for training if required. And the same goes for the manager. They can better plan their life. They can better plan their operations. I think that's the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to.
Well, thank you, Alan. Again, I want to thank all the panelists, but especially Alan. I know as you're ending your tenure, Jim Woodruff is coming on as our new training liaison. So we're going to welcome him in with open arms and have high expectations of him. Susan, thank you for contributing. I know that this is a huge program. I'm sure there's a lot more questions out there, and we can point them your direction if we need to. And again, Bobby, thank you so much for providing your expertise and experience as an OSM. So that concludes this panel. And next, we have an opportunity to transition into a different speaker. And so for that, I'm going to bring back Abby Smith, our Director of Training, and let her introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Micah. Good afternoon or good morning still, where it's still morning. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome back my boss, Glenn Martin. Glenn Martin is currently the Vice President of Safety and Technical Training, but Glenn has had so many amazing experiences in his career. He started like me as an en route controller, and he rose in the management ranks. He's been the manager at several air route traffic centers around the country. He's also been a regional administrator in Western Pacific. I mean, I think that would have been a really super cool job. He's been the Vice President of Air Traffic Services, and for about the last year and a half, he's been my boss in safety and technical training, and it's just a pleasure to work with him and a pleasure to share a vision of transformation of training. And so without further ado, let me reintroduce and bring back for the second day in a row, Glenn Martin. Glenn?
Thank you so much, Abby. I certainly appreciate that. Very nice introduction. Thank you so much. Again, I wanted to say hello to everyone and thank you for joining us today. Obviously, been getting a lot of feedback the last couple of days. I want to again thank Abby and Micah and Johnny and Ada, all of you for doing a fabulous job for us and doing a wonderful job of pulling this together and making this summit happen. This is a very important time for us during the year to get this summit, and then we'll have the air traffic summit here shortly. This is a big thing for us and a chance for us to really get folks together at the same time focused around training. Unfortunately, it also comes at a time when many of you have been challenged, I would say, and certainly you've risen to that challenge to kind of bring together so many of these ideas and so many of these opportunities we thought we had, but given we got forced into this virtual world, you've had to pivot, we've had to cancel hotels and meeting spaces and come on to this virtually. And certainly with this, we're very encouraged by this opportunity. And I hope that as we do move forward, something like this becomes very common, and it might allow all of us to get together certainly more than the one time a year. So those are some of the benefits I think will eventually become normal out of all of these crazy times. I did want to take just a couple minutes to discuss with you the importance of where we feel we are in training. There has been a lot of conversations around trying to meet people's needs. And I will say the agency and certainly the ATO has challenged us to step back and take a conscious thought process around how do we affect an employee literally from the start of their career till their last day, and take on the challenge of training throughout the career. That's a big challenge for all of us. A lot of the technical world is focused around the first couple of years of an employee, and AJI and certainly the Academy and even certainly TechOps has perfected those processes, modified those processes, created more collaborative processes. But the reality of life or career-long training has never really been our goal. And so we're working now toward coming up with a way, because we think to do that, it's going to take some transformation. And while you're already seeing some of that begin, think about where we've started. Some of that transformation continues to come from a perspective that we know and have information and have knowledge, and we need to transfer it to our employees. Well, I think the greatest thing that we're going to accomplish once we make this transformation is recognizing that you have to approach all of this from a learner-centered, learner-centric type of learning. some of the things I like to remind people is we tend to believe that we as an instructor know more than our student. And in today's world, you really need to step back and think about that. People have ready access to information now that, quite honestly, we didn't have 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and so forth. Most people go into situations far more prepared than they ever have before. And that includes the same thing with our folks that need information and need training and need new skills. They are all coming into a classroom, or they are all coming into an OJT opportunity at a different level, a different starting point, and certainly with different motivation or how motivated they are to learn. We have to adjust to understanding that learner-centered approach to getting them what they need and letting them build and letting them grow at a pace that they're able to take on. We have to think beyond the way we knew learning was done or training was done, and we really need to take on an opportunity to make this transformation, make the information and training available to them as much as it can be, and then we come in as mentors and coaches to help shape them and help them understand the FAA, understand the FAA way, and then fine-tune their knowledge and skills as they progress in their career. So we're very excited about taking this on. This is a challenge in itself to make such an acquisition for the FAA, but I would like to thank all of the folks. I'd shout out to Susan O'Hara and her team who is leading that transformation project for us. We're looking forward to trying to define those requirements and get prepared to take that challenge on here in the next couple of years. The other thing I wanted to just turn to is say, I wanted to thank all of those involved with the A5 this past year. Michelle Coppage and I have been teaming all year, and certainly appreciate not only that partnership, but that friendship as we try to understand how much is changing around us in our ability to provide training and learning to our technical workforce, and appreciate Abby's, certainly Keith DeBerry's in the past, and now Jim Doskow's leadership at that level to really help move us forward and take on the challenge of what's different and how do we get more training and more knowledge transferred to our employees given our current resources and some of our current constraints. I would just totally be amiss to not give a big shout out to Alan Borling. He has just been phenomenal for all of you on the tech ops side, dedicated professional to training and learning, has just given it his all for us throughout his tenure as the liaison. And so, Alan, thank you for everything that you've done for us, and certainly appreciate the efforts, the guidance, the direction, and everything that you've been able to give us throughout this time you've been with us. Certainly, as it's been mentioned, Sheila Griffith is with us. We're excited that she come on and help. We're really looking forward to her energy and her thoughts and her views on how we can better help technical operations move forward. We know, certainly just in the year that we've really been at this in the collaborative environment that we've had, that this is the best path for all of us forward, and that letting the needs of the technical operations workforce guide us is really what this is all about. What are your needs? When do you need these things? Who needs them, and how do we get it to them in the best and most effective way? With that, Abby, I'd like to see if we could open it up perhaps for some questions and talk through some of the things that people wanted to ask about.
Well, hi, Glenn. I'm going to join you for some.
Oh, I'm sorry, Micah. I apologize.
Oh, no. Completely fine. Abby's probably better at this, but I'll do my best. So as we're inviting some questions here into the field, I would definitely encourage people type in your questions and answer. I think we had some interest around the capital investment. I know that you mentioned that Susan is leading that effort. Can you just say a little bit more about your thoughts around capital investment and what that will mean for the service unit and also for the NAS as a whole?
Okay. I think for me, I would describe it in this way. If you take on the role as trying to help better technical workforce's ability to learn and be prepared each and every day, there is a lot of information, and it's not just coming from AJI. It's not just coming, it's coming from ASH, it's coming from finance, it's coming from HR. There's a lot of information that employees need each and every day. And so what we're wanting to do is try to create an opportunity where we can centrally build some type of system that will help us capture the knowledge, skills, and information that you need, be it simulations, be it just information, be it dialogue, be it crowdsourcing, be it peer-to-peer learning, a system that can then reach out to an employee at the fidelity that the employee needs. If it's as simple as transferring information, that's what I call low fidelity. If it's a requirement that you have an instructor or pilot to run the simulation, or it's requiring an individual to be there at the site with you for safety reasons, and so a much higher fidelity situation, that's what I would call something that has high fidelity because it's requiring additional resources. It's probably more complex, and it probably requires additional training resources in order for you to accomplish. So this system will have to be able to transfer that knowledge and skills to you at different levels of fidelity. It's also going to have to do that to you in various locations. With that, we think that we can help steer employees to understand that learning is going to be a daily event. Every day there is something going on, some change, be it as significant as new technology, or be it as small as just simply administrative information that we need to share. But the system would be focused on when you want it, how you want it, and it would allow you to feed back to the system updates that you see in the field. It would allow you to comment on that training so that that can be adjusted to better meet your needs. And it's just a system that I believe is certainly within our reach as we put it together. But it, again, the hard thing for everyone to grasp is how do you focus this from the learner, and what does the learner need? And that's the big transformation. You know, data systems and shoving information out to employees is the easy stuff. It's getting each employee to understand their needs each day and finding a way that we can meet them with this new system.
Well, sir, one thing that I'd like to expound on in that is we've had a question come in from the field that asked really, you've shown an immense capacity for collaboration. And one of the questions that came in is, how do you see PASS and potentially NATCA-X with our engineering career fields involved in that capital investment as well?
I think for me, recognizing their role and their representation for, you know, the bargaining unit workforce, I would see them very much involved in this and very much a part of helping us define the requirements for that. Certainly, I would argue those are the representatives of the workforce that I'm most interested in. What are their needs each and every day? How much can they take in each day? And how best do they want to receive that information are all great questions that I expect us to collaborate with PASS and NATCA-X around to find the answers to that so that we set the requirements for that system.
Well, sir, I'd like to invite Abby into the conversation, if you don't mind, just as an opportunity to talk more. I know that, you know, Abby's had such an influence on technical training, and one of her major goals is to really involve technology. So maybe the same question to you, Abby. Thinking about the SIP, how do you envision this transforming training in the next few years?
Micah, thank you. And, you know, it's been really fun. Glenn and I, Glenn, wouldn't you say we spend like at least 3 hours a week back and forth talking about where we want, what are kind of refining our vision and thinking about how we move forward? Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. Yes, at least.
Yeah. And so, when I think about the future, first of all, it's so exciting. And, and I'm such a child of the 80s. And so I have to say the future's so bright. I got to wear shades. So I'm wondering if I can borrow Susan O'Hara's sunglasses. But when I think about, how Glenn talked about learner centric, and, one size has never fit all. It's only ever fit one size. And I think one of the cool things that that I want to see as we move into this capital investment is really this learner engagement, so that the person who's receiving the information is also providing us feedback, so that there's loops. So if there's information that needs to be tweaked, that they're giving that. Almost think about like the concept of how Wikipedia has really revolutionized the internet and made knowledge management and the ability to gain information so much readily at our fingertips. I mean, when I think about the world's encyclopedia, I think about my phone, right? If I have a question, I look it up. And I mean, at home, between me and Fred, I mean, we're like YouTube fixer-upper people. And so when I think about that, I think, how do we really tighten the loop so that not only are we doing a more traditional pedagogical thing where it's appropriate, that's more classroomish, but how do we really facilitate people teaching other people and create an enabling capability? So, again, we talk for hours about this every week. So I could talk for hours, so cut me off and give me the shepherd's hook.
Well, I think that brings up a great point about accomplishing things. Glenn, I think one of the things that we've probably proven over and over and over in this particular summit this year is you left us last year with a real tangible desire to get things done. In fact, our theme this year, Powered by Progress, is all about what results we can get based off of Mr. Planty's input and his desires and expectations, as well as yours. So as we look towards next year, I kind of asked a version of this to Jeff earlier, but what do you think the biggest areas of improvement will be when we come back next year? What do you envision for this next year being our mountain to climb?
Well, thanks for that, Micah. And I think, first of all, I would tell you that there's a lot going on. And so I didn't catch Jeff's answer, but I can tell you he and I are thinking about a lot of things. But I definitely think we agree on what we see, although we may be focused today right now on different areas. I think absolutely foremost, the most challenging mountain we're going to climb is how are we going to get our employees the information and the skills they need this year safely. It's going to be extremely difficult to understand the impacts of this pandemic and manage to get our employees to locations and to equipment and to classrooms and to instructors in a very safe manner. And that is our greatest challenge. I think the other piece is really continuing to, you're going to continue to see us to a large degree staying focused around our current strategy. Training for technical operations has got to now involve all opportunities to receive and to deliver training. Out of agency training in your local area has got to become a norm. And Micah, I know you've led that effort with others to find those opportunities and make those a reality. We have to begin to understand we're going to do as much classroom instruction virtually as possible in order to allow employees to, quote, stay home for sure, but also stay in whatever they determine to be their safe environment, at least certainly for the foreseeable future. I think the other things around how do we now memorialize field training, what makes sense to tech ops, what equipments and instructors capabilities do they want to build and build into a sustained delivery method are other ways that I think we've certainly began to exercise, but I think those are going to become, again, much more the norm. If I think what's going to come out of this is
shuffling people all around the world is going to be the greatest challenge, and it's going to likely be the greatest resistance throughout the coming months for the world. Many other countries are not allowing people in just to come visit and those kinds of things now. But if we can begin to find pockets of our own employees who have been working together, or perhaps in a environment geographically that is stable with this, and they aren't seeing a lot of new cases and they aren't seeing a lot of deaths, then training them there is probably the right way to go. So I think those are going to be our greatest challenges. I think the only other thing that I would add is just really staying connected with our people. It's very easy now to lose touch with one another, and we've spent a lot of time, and you all have put a lot of effort in trying to better define the needs of technical operations. And that is our big challenge. And I think you're going to see that's one of our greatest successes next summer, is we've really fine-tuned how we're doing that, and we're really getting that down into a more reasonable number of requests to meeting those requests than we've seen in the past.
Well, I have kind of a follow-up to that question. As one of the senior leaders of a service unit inside of the ATO, I know last year we kind of left with multiple service units saying that their number one priority was training. I know Air Traffic Control said train, train, train. That became even NATCA's motto. And I know Jeff Planny left us last year saying training was his number one priority, and we heard Terry deliver the same message. In this year where we're facing so many unprecedented challenges with COVID-19 and everything else, what do you think the mantra is going to be from our different leaders, from yourself and from the other service units? Is training still going to be as high of a priority as it was this last year?
Well, I would certainly only speak for myself amongst that group of senior leaders, as you suggest. When you add that the number one concern is our employee safety, that overshadows a lot of things. So I will say, are you going to hear less championing of training because we are trying to figure out how to do that safely? I think you'll recognize or at least sense that that's come down in priorities. But the staffing of our engineers, our technicians, and our air traffic controllers is absolutely at a stage where training is critical, and that will be the same this year, certainly as it was last year. But it's certainly going to be more challenging for all of you that are out there making these things happen for our technical workforce. It's going to be more challenging this year. Classes could be half the size. We may have to run more swings than we would prefer. We may have to send, instructors out on the road more. It's going to be impactful to get the training done, but it's still going to remain a very high priority.
Well, I appreciate that answer. Abby, I know that you're close to the action here, and you've had a real front row seat to driving the training direction. And really, I guess, would you have any questions that you'd like to hear Glenn ask in front of everybody or answer in front of everybody?
Oh gosh, that's a interesting question. I know that. So. I
never thought I would stump you.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a day. So, Glenn, thinking about what you really want us internally in the service unit, and what you're going to hold me accountable to in the next 12 months. What does that look like? Does that look like really figuring out how we can virtualize whatever's possible to minimize the disruption to the certification and mission readiness of people during a pandemic? I mean, what does that look like to you?
I think I would say this is the way it looks for me, Abby. I think this group, all of the folks on here, have responded in a more phenomenal way than we could have ever hoped to jumping in and trying to find out how can we continue to do as much as we can Virtualizing training has just boomed. And I think that's for all the right reasons. I think it has been done very well. And I think that's very important. However, I think much of academia is struggling to understand where it's going to go in the future. And so I think for me, the challenge that you and I have is, how are we going to tell if this is working, and are we actually on the right direction? Is virtual classrooms and virtual training still leading to the same high scores in labs? Is it still leading to the success of knowledge transfer to our students? That's the big piece that I think we have to be careful of as we move through the year, that we don't go so fast, so far into virtual training that we then realize that the employees are not getting what they need, and they aren't getting to feel comfortable with what they need to do every day. The work that they do is extremely important, and it's all about safety, and we want to be sure they have what they have, or we want to be sure what they have is what they need and what they feel confident to go back on the job and do their work. So I think measuring this is one of our greatest challenges for me. I think the other one will be around, how do we begin to incorporate learning around our engineers? I think we have a good footprint to begin, but I'm really excited to see that really move forward. I think that's obviously an area that we feel we found opportunity for, and I would really like to get that one really solidified so that they feel there really is a career path for new engineers and getting them the training that they need. You guys have done a phenomenal job at laying that out and coming up with a potential there. So I think that's high on my list to see happen. The other piece is for me to, from a technical operations perspective, how are they going to change? And by that, I mean the concept of revisiting their maintenance schedules and their ability to deliver their services. It would be my desire that we were able to stay up with that. I can't tell you specifically a lot of changes that I already know we need to make, but I think that, you know, they are looking to drive in a direction that I hope we can stay up with them to make sure the way we have training situated and the way we have it available to them marries up with any changes that they want to make operationally as they deliver services.
Glenn, thank you so much for providing that vision. I think that you are setting us on a firm foundation for how we are aiming, what we're going to shoot for next year. And Abby, thank you so much for your strategic direction, that I know that you're taking your cues from Glenn and then providing that leadership to us. And frankly, Glenn, I think the partnership and collaboration this last year has it's borne so much fruit that I think Abby said it. We're going to keep using those tools from A5 in perpetuity, because they are great collaboration opportunities. They're great conversation pieces, and they're fantastic ways for us to collect the needs of the NAS and then meet them as the point of contact for technical training in the ATO. So I want to thank you for your leadership, and thank you for taking questions. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to really recognize the hard work. And so with that, I think we can probably end our question and answer session with you, sir. We've asked that you hang on for a few minutes. We're gonna, you don't necessarily have to stay on video, but we are going to just close this thing out. So if you want to be available for that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and transfer over to Johnny Riaz for a second, just as we start moving into our final phases. So Johnny, join me again. There you are. Welcome back.
Hi, and thank you, Micah, for facilitating. Those are some really good questions, and thank you, Glenn and Abby, for entertaining those. Fantastic information.
Hey, Johnny.
Yes,
I
sir.
did forget one thing before I stop here. I mentioned earlier that we do have the questionnaire available on Slido. I'm so sorry I forgot to say that, but for those of you out there in the audience, we want your feedback. We're really looking for, how did we do? Did this work for you? I mean, I'm just going to put it out there and say there's a lot of work done in the last 2.5 weeks to make this thing possible. So there's undoubtedly things that we could do better. We'll only know that if you give us that feedback. So go to Slido, type in that TO Rocks code, and take the survey in there and let us know how we did. So I meant to mention that before I got off the stage there. So Johnny, I'll hand that back to you. Sorry for the interruption.
Hey, no problem. That's a great point, and we definitely want your feedback. We need that to continually improve. And so in the same vein of saying thank you, I think Ada and I are about to sign off as MC as we do closeout. But before we do that, I want to shout out a special thank you to all the panelists and the folks in the control room who are doing a great job. And I'm sure that you're going to hear more from our leaders on their thanks as well. But my final and Ada and I's final stint in this, we'd like to play one special video just to say, to show you a little bit about what happened behind the scenes and maybe end on a light note. All right? Hope you enjoy.
All right.
Okay, we're really done.
All right. So obviously
Are we
now
gonna get some outtakes?
yeah, I think we probably could do quite a bit about it.
So.
I'm done talking for the day. You get whatever clicks you got out of that was all for free. I'm done. I'm pulling my Abby on y'all. I don't like to show y'all this, but this is my Abby.
It's fantastic. To remind people to get up. Get up, get up.
From a data presentation perspective, you know, kind of put it up and simplify it in a good way. I just made my face blue again by putting my hands up.
I probably got a couple of minutes for questions if you have any. And so I'll open it up to you if you have any questions.
Like that. And so if you find yourself,
What can I say?
See you guys later.
See ya. I don't hang on to. Okay.
All right.
All right. Breathe in, breathe out. Pressure's on.
how you? Yes, sir. Oh, I thought you raised your hand. All right, so
No, it was cut. I was cutting. Come on.
I'm sorry.
Haven't you ever done
I'm
it
new to
for
this
the
in-
television, man?
You ready for the next take? Yeah.
But also, I think this is my music to tell me to shut up. Get the. All right. No, so.
Looking forward to it.
Sheila Griffith, come on down.
I am DONE.
All right. Okay. Well, then look, we even ended on time.
Woo! Woo!
Very good. That's a wrap.
Well, I think I give all that success to Chad. He did it. I appreciate you, brother.
Yay. Thanks, Chad.
Bring us in.
You guys did great.
Well, as you guys out there in virtual land can tell, we had a little bit of fun doing this, but it did not come without a cost. We spent a lot of time, a lot of energy putting this together, and I certainly hope that we met your expectations. Just for me, before our senior leaders come on, I just want to say thank you for everybody's engagement. I especially want to thank Johnny for his involvement in Ada. Just a few just amazing key players, Steve Ingram and Chad, you guys did just phenomenal work. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to hand it off to Abby because I think that she wants to say some of her own thanks. So Abby?
Yeah, thank you, Micah. And so there's so many people to thank, and the first people that I want to thank are all the people that have tuned in over the last 3 days, because this was to help people get the training they need, when they need it, and where they need it. So first of all, thank you for being part of our family and for helping us make training better for you. I want to thank, obviously, Micah, who basically, so for those of you that don't know, I mean, you do know, because we had this pandemic, right? And we had this plan to do for real and in live in Norman, Oklahoma. So when it became clear that that wasn't happening, Micah said, so we're going to cancel. I said, oh, we're not canceling. We're going to go virtual. And he kind of looked at me like, really? And I was like, yeah, we can do it. We can do it. And so he's been a hard driving leader to make sure this thing got pulled off. Obviously, Johnny Riaz, who helped behind the scenes with getting all of the panels pulled together. I mean, they prepped us all and taught us how to look at the camera in the middle of the computer. Ada, who was the project manager extraordinaire. Michael Dunbar, who, as Micah mentioned, got injured, but has been, is always a utility player and did a lot behind the scenes. And you saw even managed to moderate a panel, even though he was in pretty bad pain during that. Rich Casey, always there to help. Jody Bowie, Shayna Sorrell, Alex Babin from the Faves department, Amy Norwood, John Korf, Nikki Leeds, Joe Shearbert from Faves, all of the requirements leads who jumped in and facilitated breakouts the first day. Obviously, Jim Doskow, Sheila Griffith, Alan Borling, Valdry Buford, Bobby Simpkins, and last but certainly not least, our amazing team from the Original Corporation, Steve Ingram and Chad Cummings, who were our producers, our virtual studio guys, who gave us courage when we just kept, we bloopered it up. It's really been a lot. And I would also like to thank my bosses, Glenn and Dave, for their engagement in this, as well as their support. Obviously, it was great to have Terry and Jeff Planny as well. I want to invite and see if Kathy has any additional thanks that she would like to give. Kathy?
Hi, Abby. Goodness, I think you've covered so much. I'm trying to think if we've missed anybody. You know, we had some help from the comm team too, Christy and and Cassie, as well as the other group managers that served as panelists and help support Micah with tools and technologies. And I know we had Susan from Tools and Technologies. I think you mentioned her. Terry was on day one. This was great. So thank you, everybody. This was a lot of work putting this together, but I think everybody did a great job, and I'm hoping that the survey results show that as well. And you're right. I said this on the first day. I didn't think that this was going to happen. I had this on the calendar, and I figured there was no way that we were going to be doing a summit this week. So I think this is fantastic. So thank you, Abby, for pushing us and driving us to do this and helping to meet the needs out in TechOps. I think this is great.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really cool because, you know, thinking about Christy and Cassie, they've been with us since the very first summit, and the beautiful graphics that we've had every year, and the prep for speakers, and so it just really takes a village, and it's kind of a good metaphor for ending Learning Together 4.0, because for us to learn, it really takes all of us together to make it happen. This year's been powered by Progress. I thank you all. Please be safe, be careful, care for yourselves, care for your loved ones, care for your colleagues, your neighbors, and the planet. We'll see you next year. Bye.